Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto trains himself instead of going through the academy part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. It started out as another normal day for Konoha's pariah, Naruto Uzumaki. He had woken up early, eaten a cup of ramen, and rushed to the ninja academy to start learning. As he left, a shadowy figure flitted after him, staying up on the rooftops. Despite the young boy not knowing this figure was there, this too was a normal part of his life. Halfway to the academy, Naruto spots a group of children abusing a small fox. Hey! Stop that right now! The would-be ninja rushed over and slammed into the much larger boy who was kicking the fox. Sadly, his heroic effort failed, as the older boy didn't even flinch when Naruto's small frame hit him. Naruto bounced away, landing on his rear. The group of children took advantage of this, and surrounded him before he could get back up. The bully he had run into grabbed his arms and picked the 6-year-old boy up into the air. Okay, we'll stop and pick on you. Mama says you're bad, so we'll be good guys for hurting you. With those malicious words, he tossed Naruto to one of his friends, who pinned the young boy's arms to his sides while holding him up. The first bully followed after Naruto, and slammed his fist into the younger boy's stomach. He pulled his hand back and did it again, grinning. One of the other children joined in, and that started a cascade. Soon, all of the children were hitting Naruto in the stomach, as well as in the sides and in the face. After several minutes of this pounding, the boy holding Naruto got anxious. Hey, I wanna hit him too, he whined. Another of the boys nodded and took Naruto, holding the poor boy upside down for a change of pace. This proved to be an unfortunate decision. Naruto's foot slammed into the boy's chin, making him bite his tongue and causing it to bleed. The boy dropped Naruto in shock, and the young boy managed to scramble away. He stuck his tongue out at the group of bullies, who were freaking out and trying to clean up the blood from their friend's mouth. The first bully saw this, and screamed at the group to get Naruto back. The boy took off, easily outdistancing the older boys. Sadly, he ran into another person, this time on accident. This person turned around, blinking in shock. He looked around for whoever had run into him, and finally looked down. He grabbed the back of Naruto's shirt and pulled the boy to his feet. There he is! Naruto squeaked when he heard this, and dove between the stranger's legs and took off. The older figure shrugged in confusion. Strange kids these days. He looked back around to where Naruto had come from, and blinked again when he saw a group of 4 boys running towards him. He put 2 and 2 together and sighed. When the first of the boys reached him, he reached out and rapped him on the head, stunning the bully. He did this to each of them when they got in range. 4 on 1? That isn't fair. The older man snorted and walked away. Naruto had paused at the corner, and saw the older person stopping his pursuers. He grinned in relief when they dropped to the ground and started crying for their mothers, then hurried on to the academy. All of this had not been normal for Naruto Uzumaki. What followed was all too familiar to the boy. You're late, Uzumaki. Don't bother coming to class if you can't make it on time. Get out. Those words chased the pariah out of the classroom. In tears, he went to the swing and sat down on it. It's not my fault I was late. Those bullies were picking on the animal. I couldn't let them get away with that. He kept crying until he felt someone sit down on the swing next to him. Wiping his eyes on his sleeve, he looked over. The person had his eyes closed, but Naruto recognized him. It was the stranger from earlier who had stopped the bullies from chasing him. While Naruto was studying the person's face, the person spoke. So, you going to explain why those boys were chasing you earlier? I'd feel really bad if you stole something from. Naruto cut him off. I didn't steal nothing. They were being mean to the fox and I told them to stop. Naruto crossed his arms and puffed indignantly, completely forgetting his tears. The other person laughed. Good to hear that. So, what are you doing out here and not in class? Without opening his eyes, the person pointed back towards Naruto's classroom. The younger boy felt his lip quivering as he was reminded of his punishment. I was late, so the teacher kicked me out. Naruto began crying again, which panicked the older person. He got off his swing and knelt down in front of Naruto, placing his hands on the boy's shoulders and shaking him. Hey, come on, kiddo, stop crying. How about the person cast around desperately. Crying children were not something he was used to dealing with, and it showed. His next words would end up changing Naruto's entire life. I know. How about I teach you whatever it was you would be learning in that classroom? At his words, Naruto looked up, using the feared puppy dog eyes on the person. Really? At the teen's nod, Naruto flung himself off the swing seat and onto the startled person. He pulled his face from the older boy's shoulder to speak. By the way, my name's Uzumaki Naruto, not Kiddo. And I'm going to be the next Hokage. His words were met with a wide grin. Well then, Uzumaki Naruto, next Hokage, I am Rei Rano. And I'm a wandering ninja. The now named Rano reached up and rubbed the back of his head. He stood up, Naruto hanging from around his neck. Say Naruto, how old are you? 4 or 5? He was curious, because the boy was rather small and light. Needless to say, he was shocked when he heard the boy's answer. Shocked, and just a little angry. Nah. I'm 6. Rano grimaced. The only reason a 6-year-old would be this small was malnutrition. Deciding not to push things right now, Rano began walking around, causing Naruto to giggle. The young boy swarmed up and turned around, so that he was now sitting on the teen's shoulders, with his hands resting on Rano's head. After Rano checked to make sure the boy was secure, he asked a simple question. Hey, do you know somewhere that I can teach you without it becoming crowded? Naruto nodded in response to Rano's question, and for some reason, used the teenage wanderer's hair as reins to guide him. They were quite the spectacle as they walked through the busy village, drawing whispers and glares. Rano noted the glares with some confusion. They arrived finally at a large empty field near a stream that had several poles on its bank. Rano hoisted Naruto off his shoulders and sat him on one of the poles and stepped back. Alright then. What was it your class was going over? Rano crossed his arms as he regarded Naruto with a cocked head. The boy fidgeted for a moment, striving to recall what the instructor had been talking about when he walked in. His small face lit up when he finally remembered. Jutsu. Sensei was talking about the different types and all. And katas. Something about katas. Rano listened to this rambling answer and tapped his chin. Shrugging, he decided to teach Naruto what he had been taught. This bit about katas would have to wait, since the teen didn't know how combat moves for swords and the like related to jutsu. After taking a moment to organize his thoughts, he sat down and picked up a leaf. Alright Naruto, since your lesson was to be about jutsu, I guess I'll start off by explaining what jutsu are. The boy leaned forward, his face intent as he listened eagerly. This Rano person hadn't been mean at all, and had helped him and cheered him up. Surely he wasn't going to be mean like everyone else was. Jutsu are how a shinobi controls various things. From enhancing our own bodies, making them faster and stronger and being able to see things that are far away, to controlling the elements themselves. Jutsu, or abilities, are divided into several branches. I'm starting off with an overview of those branches, then I'll give you a bit more detail about the primary 3 that most ninja use. He looked up at Naruto to see if the boy was listening. His hair stood on end when the boy leaned so far forward that he fell off the pole that Rano had set him on. The teen sprung forward and caught Naruto before the boy hit the ground. Naruto! You've got to pay attention to your surroundings, kiddo! He sat up and set Naruto on the ground, brushing his face and vest clean of dirt. After Naruto had done the same and sat down with his back against the pole he had just fallen off of, Rano sat against one of the other poles. He popped his neck and sighed. Now then, yeah? Okay, the main branches of jutsu are these: taijutsu, which focuses primarily on hand-to-hand combat, and techniques that are helpful to that; genjutsu, which is illusion techniques, designed to mess with your opponent's mind; ninjutsu, which focuses on elements and controlling them, as well as chakra-consuming techniques that affect the environment and not your body or mind. He noticed a look of confusion on Naruto's face, and held up one hand. I'll answer questions in a second. Okay, those are the basic 3 types of jutsu. Then you have Fuinjutsu, which deal with sealing, and Iryojutsu, which is all about healing people. There are also weapon styles, like Kenjutsu and Bojutsu. The basic introduction done, Rano waved for Naruto to ask his questions. Ne Rano-sensei, what's chakra? Rano's eyes widened at that. He blinked, then rubbed his face for a second. It's probably the kata you mentioned, and you just misheard it. Chakra, to answer your question, is energy. This energy is used for most jutsu, no matter what type. Chakra is made up of a person's mental and physical energies. Thus, someone who has trained his mind or his body has more than someone who hasn't. And someone who has trained both has more chakra to use than someone who has trained only one. As a rule, the more chakra you have, the stronger abilities you can use. He grinned at Naruto's look of understanding. Okay, now I'm going to go a bit more into detail about the basic 3 jutsu types of nin, tai, and genjutsu. First up is ninjutsu. He held up the leaf in his hand. Ninjutsu is divided into 2 main categories. First would be non-elemental ninjutsu, like this. He made the leaf float up on a pad of pure chakra. The second is the branch of shashijutsu, or elemental abilities. He focused his concentration for a moment, and the leaf split down the middle. Naruto had his eyes locked onto the leaf, his mouth hanging open. Cool, Rano-sensei. How'd you do that? Rano chuckled at the pleading pout that Naruto adopted. Wind chakra. It's my main affinity, and I'm quite good at it. That was a basic wind chakra exercise, and all I did was make a miniature blade of wind. But enough of that for right now, you'll probably go more in depth in class. Ronald discarded the halves of the leaf and stood up. Naruto stood up right after him, and followed the teen to a tree. He watched as Ronald placed his knuckles against the tree. Next up is the intro to taijutsu. This is hand-to-hand, physical strength. He pulled back and punched the tree, causing cracks in its bark to appear up and down the length. Then, the teen winked at Naruto, before punching the tree again. There was a loud crack in the air, before the tree fell sideways to the ground. Naruto was still wide-eyed. That was applying chakra to my fist. There's supposedly a woman named Tsunade who could completely destroy a tree like this with a single punch, but I don't have near that much chakra control. Taijutsu is about that. Enhancing your physical abilities, whether through a jutsu like that, through chakra enhancement like my punch, or through learning a martial arts style such as capoeira. Now there's one final branch of the basic 3, genjutsu. Ready to see that? At Naruto's eager nod, Ronald turned to him and looked him straight in the eye. The teen ran through a short chain of hand seals, his hands flashing faster than Naruto could track. When he finished, he muttered a short phrase softly, then grinned. Okay, try leaving this place. Naruto blinked in confusion. Why would Ronald tell him to leave? The 6-year-old shrugged and turned and walked back to the academy. At least, he thought he did. For some reason, he ended up next to Ronald again. Naruto blinked and turned, and ran towards the river. He leapt over it, and began running in a random direction, only to bounce off of someone's back. Gee Naruto, keep running into me like that, I'll think you're trying to hurt me. Ronald laughed. The younger boy was obviously fooled by the jutsu he had used. After watching Naruto run around like a headless chicken for several more minutes, Ronald grabbed his shoulder and dispelled the technique. Relax Naruto. That was a simple genjutsu, one that makes the victim run around in circles no matter how hard they try not to. The boy shot him a dirty look, making Ronald laugh harder. Okay, you suck at genjutsu. But relax, as an added bonus, I'll teach you something. Ronald could swear that at that statement Naruto's ears literally perked up. The boy adopted such a pathetically eager expression that Ronald felt slightly embarrassed. Please Ronald-sensei? There it was again, that blasted puppy dog eye jutsu. Ronald swore to himself that only young girls and actual animals could pull it off better than the boy in front of him. I already said I would. Alright, listen up. The boy snapped to attention in front of Ronald. When you know that you are caught in a genjutsu, there are 2 widely used methods for breaking out of it. The first, and easiest, is pain. If you can hurt yourself, that will almost always break you out of illusions. There are a few high-level ones that won't work on, but most Chunin don't know anything that strong. Makai, most Jounin don't for that matter. Ronald-sensei, I don't think I'd like hurting myself over and over, Ronald snorted when he heard Naruto. Oh, suck it up. Like I said, there are 2 ways. The second is slightly harder, but less painful. Okay, put your hands up like this. Ronald placed his hands in the ram seal, and watched as Naruto copied him. This is the ram seal, the most commonly used seal for gathering chakra. Okay, now close your eyes and visualize your body. Right above your pant line is a bluish orb. Naruto spoke up while Ronald was taking a breath. And there are lots of little blue lines all over my body, and even little blue dots too. But Ronald-sensei, what about that red orb thingy behind my blue one? Ronald blinked. Ignore that for now, not important yet. Okay Naruto, you can apparently easily visualize your chakra network. Now then, pull some of that blue stuff out and push it into the seal. Then push it out through the seal, and say Kai. What on earth is that red chakra? I've never heard of it before. He blinked when his hair lifted up. He looked at his impromptu student, his eyes widening. Naruto. Use the jutsu. Kai. The boy shouted. A wave of chakra pulsed out from the boy, pushing everything away. When things settled back down, Ronald coughed slightly. Naruto, I don't think any B-rank illusions are safe from the amount of chakra you just pumped into that. The boy rubbed his head sheepishly, then both males laughed when Naruto's stomach rumbled. Thanks for the help, Ronald-sensei. I'm going to go eat lunch now. The young boy took off like a bolt. Ronald looked up at the sky, surprised to see that it was indeed nearing noon. He shrugged and was about to leave when the cloaked figure from before landed in front of him. Ronald, you are to come with me. The teen sighed. I don't get a choice, do I? His answer was having his arm gripped, and vanishing in a swirl of leaves. Hokage's office. The cloaked and masked and Ronald appeared, the figure throwing Ronald forward. The teen put his hand up and caught himself on the edge of the desk before he ran into it. Geez guy, a little less easier wouldn't kill ya. he said, then blinked. He turned around slowly. There was a person sitting at the desk. He was older, Ronald would guess in his late 70s. He was puffing on a pipe and staring at the teen from under a large hat marked with kanji that read Hokage. So you're the guy the kiddo wants to grow up to replace? The Hokage nodded. Yes, Ronald, I am. My name is Sarutobi Hiruzen, and I am the Sandaime Hokage. Now then, you and I need to talk. Ichiraku's ramen stall. Naruto slurped down the last of a large bowl of ramen. He patted his swollen belly contentedly, then stood up and helped the waitress clear his bowls. They began washing them. This was a normal thing, for the boy would often eat more than he could afford, so the ramen stall owner would have him wash dishes to pay. They were nearing the end of the large stack when a person entered the stall, grumbling about old men who spied. Welcome to Ichiraku's Ramen, what can I get for you, sir? The waitress, asked, pulling out a small notepad and a pencil. A green tea and a chicken ramen, please. Naruto's ears perked up, he knew that voice. He plunged the last of his bowls into the soapy water and scrubbed it furiously. Came back to the rear half and was pouring out some green tea that had just finished steeping when Naruto nearly bowled her over in his haste to run to the front. She walked out after telling her father the order to see Naruto perched on the customer's shoulders. She blinked in shock. He did this earlier too. It's like he thinks I'm a horse. The quirk to the lips calmed who was afraid the customer would hurt Naruto. Rano-sensei. Thanks for teaching me today. I can't wait to go back to school and show Sasuke team what I learned. At curious look, Naruto pointed to the pavement outside the stall, where small craters were. Rano's chuckle had her looking back at the teen. So, you've already figured out how to enhance your punches? The boy nodded frantically, nearly bouncing off Rano's shoulders. A small bell chimed, and brought Rano his ramen. Well then, Naruto, I have something you might like to hear. The boy looked down at the top of Rano's head, an eager expression on his face once more. Rano dragged things out, picking up his chopsticks and breaking them in half slowly. Itadakimasu, he said quietly before pulling out a portion and wrapping it around his chopsticks to place in his mouth in a small bundle. When he swallowed, even Tucci was leaning towards Rano slightly. The old man in the tower asked me something about you, Rano continued, before repeating his actions of rolling the ramen to eat it. He swallowed again and speared a piece of chicken, placing it in his mouth to chew. When he swallowed that, Naruto bopped him on the head. What did Ogigi want already? Naruto asked with a slight edge of expectation in his tone. Rano smirked and ate more ramen before answering. Well, he wanted to ask me to train you. He trailed off again, this time to drink some of his tea. He looked up and noticed that everyone's eyes were on him. Luckily, he was the only customer in the stall, so Tucci wasn't going to mess up someone else's food. He sighed. No appreciation for setting up the moment, he grumbled. I agreed, of course, if you do. If you agree, you'll be coming with me on my travels, and I'll be teaching you more. He got me to agree to have you back in a few years so you can spend the last year with your graduating class, so you can become a Konoha shinobi, and one step closer to becoming the Hokage. In the ensuing silence, Rano was able to finish his meal. He finally tilted his head back to look up at Naruto. He was shocked to see that the boy's eyes were brimming with tears. He was about to ask what was wrong when the boy spoke. Thank you? Naruto could barely speak. Thank you. The boy was becoming louder with each repetition, until he was nearly yelling it. Rano clamped a hand over Naruto's mouth and sent a confused look at Naruto, aside from my dad and I, and the Hokage and a couple of ANBU, he hasn't really had anyone who cared. And none of us can train him, or teach him, so you agreeing to it is like a miracle for him. Rano blinked. He tilted his head. Does it have to do with a certain furry person? He thought, his mind flicking back to the conversation with the Hokage he had had. At Iam's nod, he growled. Just because this time, it was Rano who had a hand clamped over his mouth. He remembered that Sarutobi had said that Naruto wasn't to know about his burden until he was older. Rano sighed and nodded, and Iam withdrew her hand. Rano did the same, but had to put his hand back as Naruto was still repeating thank you over and over again. The teen stood up and removed his hand. Naruto, what do you need from your apartment? The boy grew quiet. Nothing, Rano-sensei, if we're going to leave, please let us just go. Rano was confused at the sudden loss of spirits. Is there anyone you'd like to say goodbye to? Rano stiffened when he felt someone walk in behind him. He turned around, and for the second time that day was looking at Hiruzen Sarutobi. Naruto vanished from his shoulders, only to impact into the Hokage's legs. Gigi-chan, thank you. The boy began repeating the word into the Hokage's robes. The elderly man nodded and stroked Naruto's hair softly. He looked up at Rano, his eyes carrying a message. Look after him. Ronald nodded to the unspoken plea. Sarutobi peeled Naruto back and knelt down in front of him. Naruto-kun, Rei-san here is going to be your teacher for the next few years, and he travels a lot. You probably won't be back here until it's time for your final year at the academy. Are you sure you want that? The boy nodded and rubbed his eyes with the backs of his hands. He turned and ran to Tucci, hugging the ramen chef's legs fiercely, before slamming into Ayam. The girl managed to bend down and catch Naruto in a hug. Be good, Naruto-chan, okay? She nuzzled his cheek, then stood up and set the boy on Ronald's shoulders. The teen blinked. Everything had just happened inside of a few minutes. Ronald winced when one of Naruto's legs hit a small seal, one that was freshly carved. It wasn't put on in ink like a normal seal, no, this was carved into his skin on his shoulder. Sarutobi had put it on himself. In the center was Naruto's name, and around it was an array. Sarutobi wasn't a fool, to go about randomly entrusting Naruto to anyone, no matter how nice. This seal would compel Ronald to protect Naruto above himself, even to the point of sacrificing his own life for Naruto. Ronald sighed and looked at Sarutobi, who merely tilted his head in a challenge. Ronald backed down, knowing he was no match for the Hokage. Alright Naruto, I hope you're ready, because I'm leaving. The boy nodded from his perch. Ronald sighed again. Well then Hokage-sama, Waitress-chan, Chef-san, see you guys in a few years. Ronald turned and headed towards the gates, knowing that if he stayed, or more accurately, that if Naruto stayed, it would be harder for them to let them go. At the gates, Ronald paused. Remember Naruto, this isn't a permanent goodbye. We'll be back in a few years. The boy's reply was to bury his face in Ronald's hair, crying. Ronald fought back a sob of his own, cursing his emphatic tendencies, then took off. Naruto wouldn't be seen by the villagers again for several years, and when he would be a totally altered person. Two figures stared at the break in the tree line before them. One was tall, easily near 7 feet tall. The other was around a foot and a half shorter. Both wore covering clothes, the shorter wearing a long coat with a hood that was pulled up, the other wearing a stark white trench coat with a black low-brimmed hat. The shorter one's head twitched slightly as he thought about what lay beyond the trees. Nissan, we're really back here, aren't we? The shorter of the duo spoke quietly. The hat on the taller shifted as he looked over at the younger one. He opened his mouth to say that they didn't have to return, but as soon as he finished speaking, his shoulder flared in pain. He subsided with a small scowl as he rubbed the spot under his trench coat. He pulled the brim of his hat down further and sighed. Yaotuto, you're home. At those words, the younger one looked up nervously. Is Aniki leaving me? The shorter figure was now worried. His fears were assuaged when the other continued speaking. And I guess we'll have to find some place big enough for the both of us. Right. The trench coat-clad one had caught the worry emanating from his companion and knew what it was about. Still, he knew that for worrying his traveling partner, he would be in a bit of trouble. He didn't know what it was until the boy glared at him before shifting behind and climbing up his shoulders and pulling his own hood down and plopping the hat on his sun-kissed hair. The boy then grabbed the dark brown hair that had spilled out when the hat was removed, getting 2 heavy hanks, one in each hand. These he used as reins to guide the other towards the gate. He paused and concentrated for a second, before 2 soft pops echoed around them. The taller figure winced as his hair was tugged and yanked. He resisted the strong urge to reach up and swat the boy off, instead heading for the break in the trees and the gate that lay beyond them. He winced again when one of the smaller figure's legs slammed down on the sore spot from earlier. He repressed another groan, knowing that what had caused the pain would be dealt with soon enough. At the gates, 2 men stood half asleep, leaning against the metal-sheathed wood. One had a saban rolling back and forth between his lips as he chewed on it. He sent a scowl at the other person, the reason he was back on gate guard duty. Kotetsu sighed when Izumo snored lightly, showing that he was more than half asleep. Nothing ever friggin' happens at the gates. Everyone who wants to cause trouble avoids them and gets detected breaking in. The saban chewing man ranted on in this vein for several minutes, before he noticed that someone, no, 2 people, were approaching. The reason the chunin had been confused was that one of the people was sitting on the shoulders of the other. Kotetsu smacked Izumo awake as the 2 travelers arrived at the gate. The lower, taller figure raised one hand, showing a small piece of paper with the Hokage's permit seal on it. Kotetsu blinked and looked at Izumo, who took the paper and checked it with a few techniques. Finally, he nodded and handed the paper back. It's legit. They can enter. Welcome to Konoha travelers. The eternal chunin gate guards turned and pushed the gates open enough for the figures to enter. After the 2 had entered, the guards pulled the doors shut. Izumo immediately leaned back against the door, settling down to return to sleep now that the momentary excitement had passed. Kotetsu rolled his eyes and went back to scanning the forest trail. Izumo's nap was interrupted when something small poked his leg. He cracked his eyes open and looked down, and blinked in confusion when he saw a fox sitting at his feet. He decided to ignore it and leaned back to return to sleep. If he had kept his eyes open a moment longer, he would have seen a human grin stretch the fox's lips before it growled quietly. There was a loud report. Kotetsu leapt to his feet, Senbon gripped between his fingers as he looked around in shock. Izumo, what on earth happened? Did you hear that explosion? There was a snarl to his side, causing the Senbon chewing Chunin to look at his partner. His eyes widened comically when he saw that Izumo was covered in Haruno pink paint, with some dripping down from his nose to stain his vest. The unpainted Chunin did a double take, then began laughing. Ha! Looks like Naruto's back. Bet he was the one riding the other shoulders. But who was that guy? Kotetsu kept laughing, knowing the only person who would be brazen enough to prank a Chunin. There was a small chirp at his ear, causing the man to nearly swallow his Senbon in startlement. He looked to his shoulder and grimaced. A small jay was sitting there, with a definitely unjayish smirk stretching its beak. The Chunin barely had time to close his eyes and lips before the bird exploded, covering his face, hair, and torso in bright sky blue paint. Izumo reached up and wiped paint off his face. He opened his eyes and blinked the paint out of them, glad that Naruto had used non-irritating paint. He looked over at the Senbon chewer, and doubled over laughing when he saw a blue stick sticking out from blue lips. Oh yeah, definitely Naruto's work. Things just got interesting again. By the way, Kotetsu, you owe me 50 ryo. You lost, he pranked us first out of everyone. Kotetsu reached up and flicked the Senbon out of his mouth, and wiped the excess paint off his face. He scowled and pulled out his money purse, and forked over the money. Then he slipped his pouch away, and placed another Senbon into his mouth. The two men leaned back against the gate, now more alert due to the boy's prank. Wonder if he does that on purpose. Oh man, Naruto, we've missed ya. Kotetsu resumed watching the trail, with his partner actually awake. Office of the Sandaime Hokage. Sarutobi Hiruzen looked back and forth between the two people standing in front of him. Tanned hands were laced behind blonde hair as the shorter person stood silent, while the taller, darker-haired person told him some of what he had taught the younger. When the boy began miming a mouth moving up and down pointlessly, the young man reached out and smacked him upside the back of his head. Otoro, get out of here. I need to talk to the old man alone for a bit. I know you're eager to go visit the Ichirakus, so go. The boy jumped up and down in place before rushing out. The two men sighed and grinned almost simultaneously. Then the younger man looked at the older man. All right, now that the brat's gone, we need to talk about this. He reached up and pulled down his trench coat and his shirt, revealing a seal inscribed on his neck. I brought Otoro back in time to rejoin with the last year of his age group, so it's time to pull this thing off. Sarutobi sighed and rubbed his head. He had known this would eventually come up, but Jiraiya had avoided all of his messengers. As it was. I'm sorry, Reikuen. The person who could remove it is missing in action. At best, I can alter it to where it only serves as a warning device in case Naruto is in danger. Rano blinked and nearly slammed his palms down on the desk. He forcibly restrained himself. Will it have the distance clause? Seeing the Hokage's nugatory headshake, the younger man sighed deeply, then nodded. Fine, alter it. Then we'll talk about Otoro's skills, and a few other things that have come up that you need to be aware of. Sarutobi stood up and moved around his desk, opening up a small cabinet and pulling out a quill and some ink. He motioned for Ronald to continue speaking. The young man launched into the full story as Sarutobi set to work. With Naruto, Ichiraku's ramen shop. Naruto slipped into the shop quietly, a large grin on his face as he surveyed the menu they had on the wall. He paused in shock when he saw the largest size available. They named a size after me and it's twice the size of the large? Yada! He shook his head, the goofy grin widening as he kept reading. He blinked again when he saw that they had also named a dish after him. He grinned and sat down at the small bar and waited for Ayam to take his order. As he waited, he slipped his hood further over his face, hiding his blonde hair and the whisker marks on his cheeks. Ayam came out of the back, hastily snatching a pencil out from behind her ear as she went to take the newest customer's order. I'll take 2 Uzumaki-sized Naruto specials, please. Something about the customer's voice was familiar to Ayam, but she couldn't quite place it. However, she did know that this man had just ordered 60 ounces of ramen. Sir, you do know that an Uzumaki-sized bowl is 30 ounces, so 2 would be 60? Do you want me to bring one out in a take-home container? Naruto, hidden under his hood, shook his head. I'll eat it all, you know that. The waitress tilted her head confusedly. She didn't think she knew this person, but there was still that niggling sense of familiarity about his voice. Then she nearly fell over in shock when the person flipped his hood up to reveal sun-kissed hair, cerulean blue eyes shot with tints of red, and 6 streaks, 3 on each cheek. She stared for several moments, unbelieving. Then, without saying a word, she walked over to a calendar and checked something on it. She spun on her heel and walked into the back. Father Naruto-kun's back. After this statement, two things happened. From the back there was a loud clatter. The other was that Ayam launched herself from where she was standing, wrapping Naruto into a tight hug, smashing his face against her chest. A tall, rotund man in chef's garb pushed aside the flap to check for himself what his daughter had said. When he saw the blonde Jinchuruki gasping for air from his daughter's grasp, he laughed aloud, a deep bellowing sound. Naruto let the man laugh happily for several minutes, but he had a problem. He knew that he didn't have the money to pay for his order, considering that Ronald kept all their money with him to prevent Naruto from spending it all on ramen. The boy scowled at this but accepted it. Now, however, it hurt since he couldn't buy his ramen from the Ichirakus. A sudden grin split Naruto's cheeks as he came up with a solution. The sympathy card would work perfectly as both of the Ichirakus cared about him, and would let him get away with things that others, say his adopted older brother, would not. He pouted, catching Ayam's attention as she watched her father laugh. Naruto-kun, what's wrong? The boy's lower lip quivered. Ronald Aniki wouldn't let me have ramen. The lie rolled off his tongue easily, probably because Ronald hadn't let him have ramen, or rather, wouldn't let him have the amount of ramen he wanted. Still, he didn't have to clarify, as Ichiraku immediately declared that as his first day back, this would be a celebration, and the boy wouldn't pay for his food. As Naruto cackled in his mind, he prepared an apology for what he had just gotten his brother into. Office of the Sandaime Hokage. Ronald sneezed just before feeling a cold shiver run down his spine. Sarutobi, who had finished modifying the seal and was stepping back, looked worried. Catching the look, Ronald took a guess. Relax, old man. I figure Rito was talking with someone about me. Probably made up something for the Ichirakus. Hirozen watched him for a moment, then nodded, satisfied that nothing had gone wrong with the ceiling. He walked back over to his desk and sat down, watching Ronald quietly. Finally, he steepled his fingers together and leaned forward. Ronald, there is one more thing I would like to speak to you about. At the man's inquisitive look, Sarutobi continued. I want you to join the forces of Konoha. He missed Ronald's eyes tightening. I can either instate you as a chunin without trouble, or if you care to take an examination, I can probably get you instated as a jounin. He looked up and saw that Ronald was standing up, pacing. Look, old man. There's a reason I am a wandering shinobi. My village was wiped out because of a traitor. The few of us who survived have all scattered to the winds. I wanted to find the man who betrayed us and slaughtered my village. I can't have that happen again. Sarutobi watched as the traveling shinobi paced back and forth, clenching his hands until his knuckles turned white. Ryuzumaki Ronald, like it or not, you're a true role model now. If you don't join Konoha, Naruto's one role model, the only person who hasn't left him in years, will be someone who doesn't find connections to a village important, someone who is shiftless. Ronald froze in his tracks, turning a cold eye towards Sarutobi. Don't look at me, that's the way it is. You are his role model. Do you really want to show him that it's fine not to belong to a village? That Ronald brought his hand up, cutting off the Sandaime's words. I'll do it. But I'm not joining the ranks until Naruto does. Until then, I'll just help train him and his friends some. The man stood up slowly, stretching out. I have one more condition. I want all information you have on the cult of Jashin, and more specifically Haiden. And I want first crack at any mission that involves Haiden. Sarutobi looked troubled by that. Before he could protest, Ronald explained something that had the Hokage's eyes widen in shock. He gave a half nod, before letting Ronald leave. The wanderer walked out of the building and raised one hand to his head. I need dango. He looked around, sniffing the air, then set off in a random direction. Ichiraku's ramen shop. Naruto, Tsuchi and Ayam were talking and laughing together when Ronald showed up. Naruto blinked, looking at his sensei. His hair was scruffy and patchy, like someone had been messing with it. He had a line of blood trailing down one cheek from a slice just under his eye socket. The eyes were looking definitely harried as they scanned back and forth nervously. Old man, you don't serve dango here, do you? Tsuchi blinked. Of all the things that they had been expecting the frantic-looking Ronald to say, that was not on the list. He looked over at the menu list on the wall. Only basic sweet dango, why? Ronald seemed to deflate and sank into the seat next to Naruto. The boy looked at his adoptive brother worriedly. I'll have 2 orders of that, and 2 to go. And no, I'm not going to explain. Naruto blinked as he sat up and looked at the slumped-over form of his teacher curiously. He'd have to get whatever had happened out of the older shinobi later. For now, he settled for watching as Tsuchi moved back to the back of the restaurant and began frying up the dango. Ayam looked at them, also curious, but shrugged and went to take the order of another person who had entered the shop just after Ronald. Tsuchi returned with the dango a few minutes later, taking the money from Ronald, who immediately ate the first two orders and stood up, grabbing the to-go order. A look to Naruto, and they stepped out into the street. Okay, we need a place to stay, Naruto. Got any ideas? The boy thought to himself while Ronald calmed down, regrouping from whatever had freaked him out. His first warning that Naruto had an idea was when he felt the boy swarm up his shoulders again. The blonde boy grinned down at the older male's upturned face. I know a place. It's at the end of this road, but it's a long way down. Ronald's lips quirked. He knew what the boy wanted. He shook his head and began walking, only to stop when his head began to be used as a drum. You're going to do that the whole way there, aren't you? Yup. Longer I take, the more you do it? Yup. Naruto grinned cheekily as Ronald's left hand came up and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Fine, fine. Hold on tight, brat. Naruto braced himself as he felt his brother charge up chakra into his legs. He nearly squealed in joy when he heard his brother utter the name of the jutsu softly. Shuinpa. The duo vanished in a trail of dust. Half a mile distant, apartment complex. A casual observer standing near the abandoned apartment complex would note a long streak of dust rushing towards the dilapidated building suddenly. Such an observer would also note a joy-filled scream echoing down the street. Then they would see a pair of people skid to a halt in front of the building, throwing up a huge cloud of dust as the person actually moving twisted his feet at an angle, reminiscent of a skater breaking on ice. Naruto clapped his hands happily from Ronald's shoulders before plopping his hands on the older male's head and vaulting off of him. The two strode to the front door, with the white-clad man sighing heavily when he saw the massive chain across the door. Well, it's a fixer-upper, that's for sure. Hang here a bit, Naruto, I'll go get the key to this thing from the Hokage. He turned and was about to leave when his young companion grabbed his hand and began dragging him around to the side, following the wall, towards a small alcove built into the building. Ronald watched in amusement as Naruto began tapping the wall, wondering why the boy was hitting stones in a pattern that reminded him of the swirled leaf that was Konoha's symbol. His eyes widened when the wall faded around the last brick, which Naruto caught in one hand and made sure to bring low. The old owner would lock me out sometimes, changing the locks whenever he found out that I had a key. Gigi got tired of me coming to him for a new key, so he showed me this. He said that this place was a really old building, like his teacher old. It was built so that people would be able to sneak out in case someone attacked the building. The wall reforms when this brick, here in his explanation the Jinchuruki wagged the brick that he had caught, is placed back approximately where it was. Come on. Naruto stepped inside, looking at his brother expectantly, watching as said man followed him inside. The boy then held the stone in midair, letting Ronald watch as the rest of the wall that had faded slowly came back into view, with the blonde boy barely snatching his hand out of the way in time to avoid having it caught there. Impressive, Naruto. How many times did the old man have to explain that before you could remember what he was saying? Ronald's tone was light as he looked at his adopted little brother. Naruto scowled at him, but held up both hands, showing 8 fingers. After Ronald finished laughing at his brother's sheepish look, he managed to gasp out another question. And how many times did your hand get caught in the wall as the Fuinjutsu reactivated? This time, Naruto growled at the older male, but relented and held up 5 fingers. That had Ronald hit the ground, clutching his stomach laughing. A few minutes later, after Ronald could breathe again, he leaned against the wall and looked around. The place was coated in a thick layer of dust, indicating that it had not been cleaned in a long time. Cobwebs hung in the corners, thick with spiders and insect husks. He sighed gently when he saw that the stairs leading upstairs were literally falling apart, with large stretches simply missing. He rubbed his brow as he fought off the impending headache. Ototo, you lived here. How many floors are there? The boy thought for a moment, tapping his chin. I think there's this floor, and 3 floors up. And a really big basement. Why? Trying to figure out living accommodations. Let's see, that basement is going to be our training center. This can be our cooking and dining floor. I'll take top floor, and you can have the floor under it. Naruto nodded to this, happy that he would be able to have a floor to himself. It would probably seem empty to the boy, but in time he would get used to it. For tonight, we're going to focus on cleaning this place up, repairs will come later. I checked the schedule while I was heading up to the Hokage's office, the academy starts in about a week. Naruto nodded again, then took Ronald's outstretched hand and helped him to his feet. Come on, Aniki, we can spend tonight in my old room. It's on the 2nd floor. That was when Naruto turned around and saw the condition of the stairs. He blanched slightly, until he felt his brother tap his shoulder and point to his feet, which were glowing a faint blue. The blonde Jinchuruki nearly slapped his forehead, irritated that he had forgotten that simple shinobi ability. He focused his chakra to his feet, and led his brother along the wall to the upper floor. When they arrived in Naruto's room, the two found a place that had been utterly stripped of everything. There was nothing but dust in the room, not even any debris or remnants of any furniture. Naruto wiped at his face, telling his brother that dust had gotten in his eyes. Rano laid one hand on his shoulder and squeezed it lightly, hiding his anger at whoever had stripped the boy's room. Get the bedding scrolls out and bunk down for the night, Naruto. I'll cook breakfast tomorrow, so don't worry about it. The younger male nodded numbly and grabbed a pair of scrolls out from one of his pockets. He stopped when Ronald squeezed his shoulder again. Relax some. I know it hurts, little brother, but just remember this, you've got better stuff now, and they aren't getting anywhere near it. This made the boy smile slightly, before he nodded and unsealed the scrolls and laid out a pair of small cots and 2 sleeping bags. With a last look around his bare room, he burrowed into one of the bags and tried to put himself to sleep. Ronald stepped over and brushed his adopted brother's hair out of his face, sighing when the boy opened his eyes. He reached down slightly and squeezed the boy's neck carefully, nodding to himself when Naruto drifted into sleep after the pressure point was pressed. Sorry, Otuto, but you need sleep, and right now you're too upset to get it normally. And I meant what I said on the road, Naruto. We'll find out who your father was. He said it softly, swearing it once more to the boy. Unable to sleep himself, he walked over to the windowsill in the room and sank down onto it, staring out at the village. That was one of their biggest reasons for actually returning, well, Naruto's at least. He felt that it was here in Konoha that he would solve the mystery of who his parents were, starting with his father. The man's eyes traveled back to his adopted brother, and he sighed softly, remembering the one clue he had as to who Naruto's father was. Despicable author style, flashback technique. Naruto was curled up in his sleeping bag, having just finished his shift. Rano was perched up in a tree, scanning the area lazily while slowly carving a branch into nothing. His eyes snapped up at a small popping sound, but he relaxed when he realized it was the fire crackling. He settled back down, but froze when he detected another faint sound, one that had been masked by the noises from the fire. Dark eyes shot around the small clearing, latching onto a glint of metal that was rising above Naruto. The wanderer narrowed his eyes and sank his hands into the branch under him, and swung down and around, launching himself towards the glint. His feet slammed into a hard chest, kicking a shadowy assailant, shoving him out of the clearing and against a tree. Rana landed on his feet in a crouch, straightening up and bringing a short sword out. He threw the blade without hesitation, piercing the attacker through the chest, pinning him to the tree he had landed against. The shinobi dashed over to the pinned attacker, thrusting 2 fingers into the man's throat, temporarily paralyzing him from the neck down. A kunai spun out from his pouch and pressed against the man's neck, the tip cutting into one of the folds of skin there. Tell me who you are and why you just tried killing my ward, or so help me I will make you bleed like a stuck pig from every part of your body. And then I will slit your throat. Talk. The man Ronald had pinned to the tree spat on the wanderer's boot. He looked down at his boot and looked back up at the pinned man with disgust written across his features. Ronald focused his will for a moment, with water soon flowing up from a bottle on his hip, wrapping around his arm then down to the blade. The water created a spike that dug through the skin on the man's throat, curving into a hook that pierced the flesh. The water hook tore back, ripping a strip of flesh away. A second kunai pressed against his stomach, and the man's eyes widened in fear when he saw water spiraling around his tormentor's arm. I'll talk. You fucking leaf Yaru. Of course I'd want to kill him. He looks just like his kami-forsaken father. When the Awakage hears that the Rock Destroyer has a son, Stone will not rest until his spawn is dead. There was rustling behind the two as the rock ninja's yelling woke Naruto up from his slumber. Rano looked back through the trees to see his young ward sitting up and rubbing his eyes tiredly. Kyuso. Gotta end this now. Normally I'd leave him alive, but he not only tried to kill Naruto, he's ready to get an insane tyrant on my ward's trail. I cannot let that happen, and not only because of this stupid seal. Rano sliced through the man's artery, catching the blood spray with the water around his arm. He blasted the bloody water out into a bolt that flew through the trees. After removing his short sword from the man's shoulder, he sheathed it and strode back to the campsite. Rano-sensei? Where'd you go? The boy looked worried, as if he was afraid that Rano had been about to leave. The shinobi rested his hand on the messy mass of blonde hair and ruffled it lightly. Relax, kid, I had to take care of a little business. Nothing big. Naruto looked worried for a moment longer, then nodded slightly and settled back into his sleeping bag. Rana leaned against the tree, staring at the boy in thought. Just who is your father, Naruto? And why on earth is he called the Rock Destroyer? The name made him picture someone large and brawny who shattered giant boulders with his fingers. Shaking that image out of his head, he sighed and looked up to the stars. Flashback technique. Release. Ronald shook his head slightly while staring up at those stars from the window in the apartment. He had been able to talk to an acquaintance of his, and all he had found out was that the Rock Destroyer had a different cover name and hailed from Konohagakure. The wanderer turned away from the window, pausing as something that he could see at the edge of the window caught his eye. He leaned against the wall and looked out the window further, looking at the Hokage monument. Huh. Sarutobi looks a lot younger up there. He turned away and was laying down on his own cot when a thought occurred to him as he drifted into sleep. Another of those faces seemed familiar, but from where? I'll worry about it some other time. After checking to make sure that Naruto was asleep, the older man settled down into his own cot and drifted to sleep. Naruto woke up when the sun hit his face. He rubbed his eyes before standing up and stretching. He staggered into the bathroom and scrubbed at his teeth with the thin brush that he had purchased the day after returning to Konoha. The boy stumbled back into his bedroom and headed over to the dresser. When the drawer opened, Naruto grumbled again about evil older brothers who didn't appreciate the awesomeness of orange. He pulled out a blood-red shirt that had splashes of black and white mixed in. He followed that up with solid black cargo pants. He remembered Ronald's admonition to hide his body as much as possible, to confuse possible enemies, and pulled out a deep green cloak. He folded the coat over his arm and wandered down to the main floor. Ronald had been up before him as usual, and was already cooking. Naruto had found a stove that Ronald was able to repair, so they no longer had to rely on the spit. Ronald looked up and waved the boy to a seat at the table with the spatula. Bacon will be done in a minute, Narukuin. Biscuits are already finished. You know where the orange juice is. The boy nodded and snagged a plate from the cupboard and a mug. He set them on the table, then walked over to the fridge and opened it, pulling out the orange juice jug. He sat down at the table and moved 2 biscuits to his plate before filling his mug with juice. He looked up and blinked happily when Ronald set the steaming plate of bacon down in front of him. He scooped several slices and wolfed them down. He crunched through them with a delirious expression on his face. The older shinobi settled in across from his adopted brother and opened up a bag of white powder. Naruto rolled his eyes. Really, Aniki, do you have to eat your bacon with powdered sugar? Ronald snorted and sprinkled the sugar onto his bacon. He picked up a strip and munched on it, giving a contented sigh. You're addicted to ramen, so you don't get to say anything at all about my eating habits. And I heard something about me not letting you get any ramen. He stared at the younger boy, who blushed and hunched his shoulders up to his ears. Naruto pouted for a moment. I wanted ramen, and Ayam and Tucci took pity on me and fed me ramen. Ronald shook his head and munched down on more of his powdered sugar-coated bacon, which made Naruto shake his own head. After several minutes, and another batch of bacon, the two sat back from the table and looked at each other. Ronald peered out the window, then back at Naruto. Better hurry up, bucko, your class should be starting soon. And it wouldn't do for you to miss the first day of schooling in 6 years. Aniki, you taught me better than any of those people at the schools would. Be that as it may, you still have to go. Now shoo. Make sure to take your scrolls, but keep the fact that you know Fuinjutsu a secret. Keep them in the bottom of your pouches. Yes, Ronald-san. Naruto stood up and walked through the house, heading to his cabinet of supplies. He pulled out a few small scrolls out and tucked them into various pouches on a belt. He hung the belt on his waist, adjusting it so the pouches were at the small of his back. He placed several kunai and shuriken in the pouches above the seals, careful to keep them from cutting the seals on the scrolls. The boy reached into the back of the cabinet and pulled out a short staff with 2 iron bands, one on each end. He twirled it end over end, then set it against the wall cabinet door and pulled out a holster for it. He strapped the holster onto his back, then slid the staff into it. He sighed and walked back down to the main floor, where Ronald was leaning against the front door. He had a small pack resting on one palm as he sipped on a steaming cup of tea. Ramen. I figured you'd get hungry halfway through class. The boy blushed and took the box. Ronald stepped aside after opening the door. Naruto walked past his older brother, then froze. Ronald was turning towards the door when the small figure slammed into him, wrapping him in a tight hold. The young man rested his hand on Naruto's head. Relax, Otuto. You'll get to know them, and they'll get to know you. But Aniki, the Ronald read the fear in his adopted brother's face. If they worry about you being the jailer of the single most powerful demon, then they aren't really worthy of being your friend. Besides, if you're worried they might dislike you because you hold another consciousness in you, make friends with the Abirame heir. They have hives living in them, so you holding one entity shouldn't bother him. He knelt down in front of the younger boy and tilted Naruto's chin so the boy was looking into his eyes. You'll do fine. I only suggest you avoid the Uchiha and the Hyuga. Both clans tend to be upright and pretentious. Be especially wary around the Uchiha, because his Kekkei Genkai, when he activates it, is incredibly annoying. The boy nodded and wiped his eyes. He drew in a shuddering breath and grinned at Ronald. Now what will you be doing while I'm in class, Aniki? Ronald grimaced at this. He sighed and ruffled Naruto's hair. Honestly, I don't know yet. The Hokage wants to see me once you're in class. Naruto nodded again, then hugged Ronald again. He stepped back, then scuttled outside, bending over long enough to pick up his ramen box. He stared at it for a moment, then looked back up at his older brother. Ronald sighed before tossing the boy a small bottle of water and a pack of matches. We really need to get you away from that elementalist bent you've got going. The boy grinned and shook his head, then dashed off. Ronald stepped back inside and closed the door. He walked over to the table and sat down at it, resting his forehead on his palms after setting his tea down. A few minutes passed, with him returning to drinking his tea slowly. He set the cup in the sink and gathered the rest of the dishes from their breakfast. He created a clone gathered of winds. The near-invisible clone set to work washing the dishes as Ronald climbed up the stairs to his floor. He began getting dressed, keeping his colors to simple brown shades. The coat he chose, though, was a stark white trench coat, with a few seals on the inside to keep it clean of dirt. He settled it onto his shoulders and walked over to his weapons cabinet. He pulled out scrolls similar to the ones that Naruto had retrieved earlier. He placed them in pouches identical to what Naruto had, but his were on a harness. Out of the back of his cabinet, he pulled a pair of blades. One was a long sword, a long, straight, double-edged blade. This was placed in at his waist. He checked the second one, a claymore. It had been a while since he used it, and sure enough, it could use a sharpening. He shoved the coat off and put on the harness, then replaced his coat over it. He pulled a whetstone out of the bottom of the cabinet and began striking the blade against it as he walked out of the house. Ronald ignored the strange looks that were sent his way. After all, it's probably not every day that they see someone carrying a giant blade around in one hand. He shrugged and kept walking. With Naruto. Naruto settled in at the back of the class, glad that Ronald had shooed him out early. He had arrived before anyone else did, and was able to watch everyone as they entered. He saw a boy with spiky hair, similar to his though of a brown shade rather than his own sun-kissed blonde, walking in with a boy who had swirls painted on his cheeks. That's probably the Nara and the Akimichi. He watched as the pineapple-haired boy sat down next to the other one, and promptly fell asleep. The boy with swirls merely shrugged and pulled out a bag of chips and began munching on them. That nails it. He's as lazy as the Nara we ran into over in Tanzaku, and the other has the appetite of an Akimichi. This thought was confirmed by the fact that the larger boy had pulled out 4 more bags of chips and was munching his way through those as well. Next to arrive was a quiet duo. The girl was wearing a heavy jacket that hung down to her knees. Her hair was a light color, lavender. Naruto blinked at the unusual shade, but when he saw the solid white of her eyes, he shrugged it off as a Kekkei Genkai trait. Isn't that one of the Hyuga? She doesn't seem to be pretentious like Aniki warned me she would be. He turned to look at the second arrival. The male half of the duo was so similar in outfit to the girl that Naruto nearly did a double take to make sure the girl hadn't moved as fast as he turned his eyes. But this boy's coat looked thinner, more akin to the trench coat that Rama wore than the heavy coat the girl did. He also had on a pair of round black glasses. Naruto could swear that there was a faint buzzing coming from the boy. He's got to be the Aburame. A small bug crawled out from the boy's high collar, confirming Naruto's hypothesis. The first 2 boys hadn't even registered Naruto's presence. These second 2 did though, the girl blinking and tilting her head slightly, then pulling her face down into her jacket. The Aburame, though, sat down in a seat near him. Naruto cocked his head as a trio of small beetles skittered to him. He grinned and laid his hand down, letting the insects crawl onto his skin. They roamed up one arm before running down the other and going back to the boy. The Aburame blinked and tilted his head in recognition to Naruto. Said boy's eyes returned to the door in time to see yet another coat-wearing boy enter the room. This boy's coat seemed to be more like a parka, a fur-lined one. Naruto's eyes widened when a small furry head popped out of the back of this boy's hood and barked. Inuzuka, the animal living pack. He grinned, hoping that he would be able to get along with this boy as well. The Inuzuka sniffed the air, then seemed to turn his head to the dog in his hood, then turned to look straight at Naruto. The boy seemed confused, then shrugged and waved to Naruto before sitting down by the Nara and Akimichi. The next person to enter set Naruto's hair on end. Cold, I am better than you stare. Hair that looks like a mallard's rear, onyx-shaded eyes, blue shirt with a fan, that has got to be the Uchiha. And unlike the Hyuga girl, I don't think this guy will be proving Nissan wrong. After the Uchiha strode into the room like he owned it, and sat down at a desk as if he had no rivals, it seemed like a floodgate opened. People began streaming in clusters, giving Naruto no time to grow accustomed to their faces. After an eternity, the teacher entered. He had spiky hair as well, of the same shade as the Naras. Both had the same style of pineapple-spiked hair, though there the resemblance ended. The teacher had a large cross-shaped scar running across his face, with his nose being covered by it. He sat down at his desk and looked over the notes for the day when there was a loud clatter outside the room. Everyone but the Nara and the Uchiha looked up, and while most sighed and returned to what they had been doing, Naruto kept his eyes on the doorway. He was rewarded with the sight of two girls, one blonde, and the other pink, a hair shade that truly made Naruto look twice, trying to enter the room simultaneously. For some reason, the door that had let groups of four in with no trouble was not large enough for the two of them. This was probably due to the fact that they truly were trying to enter at the same time, not giving the other even the shortest of leads that would have let them in with ease. Finally, the doorframe creaked and bent, sending the two girls to the floor in an ungainly heap. As they struggled to right themselves, Naruto's thoughts registered them. Blonde hair in this village has to be a Yamanaka. Other than me, they're the only people I remember having a shade this light in hair tones. But who on earth is the pinkette? Naruto decided to listen, in case he learned what he was interested in. The two walked over to the Uchiha, then began an argument. Out of the way, Ino Pig, I was here first. Naruto sat back. Well, her first name is Ino. Wow, they are uninventive in this village. Sheesh. Her dad's name is Inoichi. Which means number 1 Ino, or Ino 1. Conceited much, Blondie? Not a chance, billboard brow. I got here first, I get to sit next to Sasuke-kun. And the Uchiha's first name is Sasuke? Crow's sorry tribute to the name. I get to piggy. Nah, Sakura, I do. Sakura. Cherry Blossom, and she has pink hair. Wow. Just wow. Ronald Neeson would be having a field day with this group. Several eyebrows around the room began twitching as the argument between the two shrill girls continued. And then he'd have a field day with them, and exhaust these wannabe kunoichi. Sheesh. Would I have turned out like that if Aniki hadn't rescued me? The boy shuddered at the thought of being a louder person than he already was. Ino and Sakura, sit down and shut up. Naruto blinked. This was apparently the famed big head no jutsu that all academy teachers were required to learn. He was relieved that Ronald had never learned that one. The man was loud enough without it. The girls squeaked and plopped down in two random seats, either one taking the seat next to their precious Sasuke-kun. The teacher nodded once they were sitting down. All right. Now that everyone is in their seats, we have a new classmate today. What? Hey Iruka-sensei, why does some snot-nosed brat get to join us? Isn't that skipping grades? The Inuzuka boy was the first to voice disagreement. Kiba, this person was told to report here by the Hokage. Not to mention that I probably already know more than the rest of these kids. Naruto kept his thought to himself though, recognizing the fact that the Inuzuka boy, Kiba, felt threatened and was trying to establish some kind of pack hierarchy. It has got to be an Inuzuka thing. Kiba grumbled but had to accept it. Iruka looked through the classroom, trying to find Naruto. He spotted him at the back of the classroom and gestured for him to stand up. Naruto, why don't you stand up and introduce yourself? Naruto could tell that it wasn't a request, as he stood up slowly. All eyes in the room flitted back to him, except for the Nara boy, who was asleep. The Akimichi prodded him to alertness, and whispered in his ear. The Nara yawned and turned around to stare as well. Naruto shrugged at this byplay. He settled his shoulders and began speaking. My name is Uzumaki Rei Naruto. I was born here in Konoha, but my adoptive older brother removed me from the village 6 years ago so he could instruct me in the shinobi arts. I returned last week and have refamiliarized myself with the village. I am currently living with my brother. My skills are those taught to me by various sensei while in our travels. My dreams are my own, as are my likes and dislikes. He nodded to Iruka and sat back down. The class immediately began murmuring to each other about him. Who wears a cloak in this weather? I know. And what's with that last name? He's got to be a Yamanaka with that blonde hair of his. I heard that he and his brother moved into an abandoned apartment complex and completely fixed it up. What about that his brother is really strong? If his brother is, and he's taught this Naruto kid for 6 years, he's bound to be strong too. Shut up and pay attention. The class snapped forward, their eyes locked on Iruka. His head reduced from the massive size it gained under the technique as he looked across them. He picked up a slip of paper and looked down at it. He seemed to raise one eyebrow at it, but shrugged. He was standing up as another man walked in. This man was dressed like a normal chunin. He had silver hair, and was wearing a hat that made its stick at random angles. He clapped Iruka on the shoulder before looking at the class. His eyes tightened when he saw Naruto. Mizuki, just in time to help me pass out the pop quiz. Iruka handed the second man a sheaf of papers, then began passing the papers out. Mizuki started at the back of the classroom, meaning he began with the odd Hyuga girl. The man paused for a moment before handing Naruto his test. The boy could swear there had been a hand sign before he got his test. Naruto shrugged and looked down at his test, wondering what questions would be asked. Shinobi A throws a shuriken at a velocity of 22 feet per second at an angle of 30 degrees from the horizontal. Shinobi B throws a kunai at a velocity of 44 feet per second at an angle of 47 degrees from the horizontal. What velocity and angle will Shinobi C have to throw his saman to hit both of the other shinobi's weapons? Naruto blinked and reread the question. He rubbed his forehead in thought and tried remembering if Ranal had covered this. A breeze floated into the room, causing the papers to lift from their spots in front of the students. Naruto had frozen. His paper, despite the fact that he was right by the window, hadn't moved at all. The boy placed his hands under the table in a ram seal. He leaned his head against the table to hide his lips as well. Genjutsu Kai. He spoke softly. His chakra sifted out and disrupted the illusions nearby. Iruka's eyes shot up when two cloaked men suddenly appeared in the back of the room. He saw the masks they were wearing and was about to settle down when he saw a small kanji etched into the forehead on each mask. Oh no. Ninbu, does Hokage-sama know? The two figures looked at each other, then vanished in gusts of wind and leaves. Naruto had not noticed the two, as his attention was on his test. Sure enough, his Kai had dispelled an illusion on his test. He scooped up the pencil on the desk and began answering. 1. What was the name of the Shodame Hokage's Kekkei Genkai? Oh yeah, these are so much easier. Naruto easily answered the questions on the true test. He was the third person to turn it in, the Aburame and Akimichi having finished before him. He blinked when he counted the finished papers on Iruka's desk. There was a discrepancy, for papers there, with only 3 people having gone up. Naruto turned around and was walking back to his desk when he saw what had caused the oddity. The Nara boy had fallen back asleep, but there was no test in front of him. The boy chalked it up as the Akimichi having taken his friend's test up when he finished, and sat down where he had been. A beetle skittered up onto the back of his hand that he set on the desk. Naruto raised his hand up so the insect was on level with his eyes. He brought up his other hand and ran one finger down the back of the carapace, which drew an odd buzz from the insect. He sat there, staring at the beetle, for several minutes. A loud shriek brought his attention up from it. Oh God! One of you bug freaks is enough. Don't tell me there's 2. Naruto lifted his head and saw the pinkette from earlier staring at him with disgust evident on her face. The boy decided it was time to speak again. Would you be quiet? This is a Kikeichu, a special insect. Really, Pinky, if you are going to insult insects, be sure to not insult one of the more prominent clans in your village. His tone was bored. Inside, his mental checklist ticked her off as a potential friend. Reacting like that to a beetle meant she would probably take his status badly. He stood up, raising one eyebrow when he saw they were the focus of the classroom. At the front, Iruka seemed content to let him handle it, going so far as to lay a restraining hand on Mizuki, who seemed about to say something. Naruto walked over to the Aburame boy and laid the hand with the Kikeichu on it on the boy's shoulder. The insect seemed to bow to him before skittering back onto the Aburame, disappearing under the boy's coat collar. You can call me Naruto. Likewise, I am Shino. Naruto sat down next to Shino, then looked back. The pink-haired girl, Sakura, seemed to be in a state of shock. He rolled his eyes and sent a small gust of wind at her, causing her to stumble back and fall onto her desk. Iruka had watched silently through the situation, and looked to be pleased with the outcome. His teaching partner, Mizuki, had the trademarks of someone reigning in anger, something that confused Naruto. The boy sat back in his new seat and decided to be wary where the silver-haired Chunin was concerned. The rest of the class returned to taking their test. Naruto and Shino began a quiet discussion about insects of various kinds, the Jinchuruki quite pleased to find someone who shared a similar interest. The Aburame seemed slightly happier as well, judging from the strange vibrations that came from occasionally, which Naruto interpreted to be laughter. With Ranal. Ranal was standing in front of the Hokage, his claymore now sheathed on his back. The old man was tapping tobacco into his pipe, taking his time. The younger man kept his patience, staring straight ahead at a spot above the Sandame's head. Finally, the man looked up at the wandering shinobi. Reikuen, I wish to ask you something. The older man spoke slowly, mixing formality with familiarity. Ranal's eyes dropped to the leaders, indicating interest. Would you give up your wandering nin status and join Konoha? The younger man's eyes rose, staring into the distance. His expression seemed troubled. Hokage-sama, you know I was a shinobi of a village before, correct? What you don't know is that I didn't part amicably with them. No, I'm not a noob nin. I say I did not part amicably because Ranal trailed off, lost in the past. Sarutobi waited patiently, feeling that if he did, he would get the rest of the story. Because there was no one to part with. The rest of my village was destroyed. I am the only survivor. Even the civilians were killed Hokage, right down to infants in their cradles. I have not joined another village out of a fear that if I did, my history would repeat itself. Sarutobi stood up and set his pipe down on the mantel, then walked back to his desk. Rather than sit down, the older shinobi slammed his palms onto the desk. Reikun, you do not only have yourself to worry about now. Naruto-kun is looking up to you for guidance. When he becomes a shinobi in truth, I would rather not have his role model be a wanderer. And I severely doubt that whatever annihilated your village could do the same to Konoha. He sank down into his desk, steepling his fingers as he regarded the young man in front of him. Ronald sighed and looked up at the ceiling. His gaze dropped slowly to Sarutobi's visage. Sandaime-sama, I will agree, if you tell me what you know of a Jashin cult. It was one of their members who wiped out my village. The Hokage's eyes narrowed. I know nothing good, I'm afraid. Jashin is a bloodthirsty demigod, one who delights in carnage and discord. The more trusted of his followers gain a twisted kind of immortality. He sat back in his chair, staring at Ronald as he spoke. The young man's eyes had tightened when Hiruzen said that Jashin delighted in carnage, his mind flitting back to his village when he returned from his mission. He drew out his claymore and sat down, laying the blade across his knees. The long sword settled in the gap between the seat back and the cushion as he stared back at Sarutobi. Finally he sighed and nodded. I'll join, but only because I don't want Naruto to grow up like me. The Wanderer's life was fine for me, but Naruto, he needs people around him, people he can grow to be friends with. Besides, he grinned, Naruto still wants to take your place and be the strongest ninja in Konoha. The Hokage grunted. The man in front of him was evading saying something, but he wasn't the leader of his village for nothing. He decided not to push Ronald for now. Besides, he just agreed to be a Konoha nin. I'll have a lot more time to talk to him. The old man stood up and walked to a cabinet and pulled out a metal plate on a blue band and a tan vest. It is my pleasure to induct you into the ranks of Konoha's ninja forces, Rei Ronald. On my authority as the Sandaime Hokage, I instate you as a Chunin shinobi. He handed the pair of items to Ronald, then sat back down at his desk. He watched as the younger shinobi traced the design of the leaf symbol with the tip of one finger. Ronald stared at the design for a long minute, then sighed. He pulled the band up to his neck and tied it on tightly. He stood up and laid the harness and swords on the chair and pulled on the vest. It was a little snug, but the tan matched in with his brown shaded outfit. The harness and weapons went back on, then the trench coat swept up into place. The new Chunin bowed to the Kage. If that is all, at a nod, Ronald began walking to the door. When he was at the doorframe, he paused, his hand resting on wood. Sarutobi-sama, if you get any information on the shinobi of the hidden hot springs village known as Haiden, please tell me. Sarutobi tilted his head slightly, then nodded again. Ronald bowed again and strode out through the door. I need dango after that. Wonder where I can find some in this village. With Naruto. Ronald would have been proud of his brother/student. Naruto had put up with the shrieking sounds from the pinkette all day, though he really was contemplating slapping a silencing tag onto her mouth. Not even the blonde girl she had come in arguing with was as loud as she. He leaned over to his new friend. Ne, Shino-san, is her screeching normal? Hi Naruto-san. This is a daily occurrence. The boy responded with a controlled wince. The object of their discussion was currently screaming about how awesome her Sasuke-kun was. The Uchiha had just managed to nail 7 of the targets with kunai. The boy snorted and looked at Naruto. Beat that dope. Naruto sighed at that. He had been termed the dope because everyone else had attended the classes, while he hadn't. It would take him becoming Rookie of the Year to banish the nickname. And Naruto really wasn't that interested in showing off. But for some reason the black-eyed boy irritated him, so just once, he was going to put the boy down. Naruto stepped up to the line, then looked at the targets. There were 10 in all. The boy looked down at the ground, then judged the distance between himself and the targets. He turned around and walked several paces back, nearly doubling the distance to the targets. He reached into a pouch and pulled out several samban. Eyebrows around him rose. Hey Iruka-sensei. He's trying to use a non-regulation weapon. The pink-haired banshee wailed, trying to discredit Naruto. Ever since he had put her down this morning, she had disliked him intensely. She nearly had a heart attack when Naruto snorted. Again Pinky, you are proving you aren't as smart as you put yourself to be. These are samban, a favored weapon of hunter nin and medical ninja. Now shut up and watch. The boy tossed the samban up into the air, which made everyone laugh. Hey Dobe, the targets are over there. Naruto ignored the jibe from the Uchiha. One hand rose to his shoulder, and his cloak spun back. His hand flashed down, whipping the staff out. It flickered back and forth among the falling saban, then slid back into the sheath across Naruto's back as the cloak settled back in place. Only Iruka and Mizuki had been able to keep up with the rapid movements. Over at the targets, Mizuki blinked. The boy had moved far faster than the other academy students did, outdoing even Sasuke. What's more, there was a saban set firmly in the bullseye ring on each target. Not necessarily in the exact center, but to have managed to hit the bullseye at all with rebound strikes was impressive. He signaled Iruka, the discreet hand signs for a perfect score. Iruka nodded and marked it down, then smiled benevolently at Naruto, who had moved back to the circle of watchers. Said boy nodded back, glad that at least one of the teachers wasn't out for him. Lunch had been interesting, with Mizuki trying to bring Naruto some food. Shino had warned him away from it. Mizuki had been forced to eat the food, and had to rush to the bathroom. After a quizzical look at Shino, the Aburame had explained that his Kikaichu had smelled laxative powder on the tray. Naruto looked over to the targets, where Mizuki still looked uncomfortable. Serves you right, team. After tallying everyone's scores up, Iruka looked pleased. He looked up at the class. Alright everyone, tomorrow we will have the taijutsu and ninjutsu exams. Go home and get a good night's rest, and be ready to go then. The class drifted apart, the dismissal in Iruka's voice evident. Naruto and Shino paused, each turning a different way. Naruto decided to risk it. He opened his mouth. Naruto-san, I know your status as the container. And it makes no difference to me. Naruto was stunned into silence. He turned around, but Shino was gone. A silly grin rose to his face. He knows and yet he wants to be my friend. Awesome. The boy headed home, the smile never faltering. Apartment complex. Naruto woke up when the sun slanted across his eyes. He sat up slowly and rubbed the back of his hand across his eyes, clearing the grit that had accumulated there in his slumber. He yawned widely and stretched luxuriously, feeling his vertebra pop back into place with a chain of pops. The boy swung his legs out from under the comforter and stretched them out in front of him parallel to the ground. Finally satisfied, he hopped out of bed, landing with a muffled thud on the carpeted floor. His feet sinking into the dense carpet, Naruto trudged over to his wardrobe and pulled it open. He stared blankly at the garments hanging inside of it, his mind still not fully functional. Slowly, one hand crept out and pulled down a navy blue shirt. He shrugged into it and got out a thin, short-sleeved white button overshirt. After a minute of staring, he took out a pair of black slacks. After tucking the shirts into the slacks and belting on a thin black band, Naruto reached in and pulled out the harness for his pouches and staff. After settling the harness into place, out of the cabinet came a midnight black trench coat with white waves on the edges. He slung this over his shoulder, not putting it on yet. Naruto walked over to the weapons cabinet and began pulling out his weapons scrolls and a staff. This staff was a little bigger than Naruto was, and seemed to shine silver. At each end was a heavy black band of iron. The boy gripped it tightly, and remembered what he had forgotten to put on. He walked back over to his clothing cabinet and pulled out a set of fingerless gloves with small rubber pads on the inside. The cloth of the gloves was white, with black bands of metal on the outside as protection. He slipped the gloves on and grinned when he picked up the metal-coated staff, pleased with the fact that it no longer slid in his hands. The act of testing out his staff had woken the boy up slightly, but it was evident that he wasn't fully awake when his foot caught on a stair, and he flipped end over end downwards. His fall was cut short when a hand snagged the back of his shirts and jerked him to a halt. He looked around slowly and gulped. No, she shouldn't be up this early. Well, brat, it's your big day and you can't even walk straight. Getting all excited about being teamed up with some hot little girl. Anko-nichan, he gasped her name, twisting in her grip. She was cutting off his airflow, and his face was turning blue. Anko-chan, let him go, you're choking him. She blushed slightly and let Naruto go. His fall was promptly resumed as Anko had been holding him off the ground. There was a thud, and Naruto was staring at a blue-clad shoulder. Now Anko-chan, you know that there are no hot girls in Naruto's grade. Well, except maybe that blue-net Hyuga girl, but she sees our Naruto as a brother. Thanks, Aniki. Naruto grinned up at his adopted older brother. The older male snorted and rapped Naruto on the head. Seriously, I know I trained you well enough for you to keep a hold on your weapon. Naruto blinked and looked at Ronald's forehead. There was a bruise there. Ronald jerked his head backwards over one shoulder, and Naruto looked. There on the floor was the staff. The boy thought back, and realized he had let go when he tripped. He rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. There was laughter behind Naruto. And I thought you were good enough to dodge it, Ronald. The shinobi looked over his little brother's head, and stuck his tongue out at Anko. Her left hand flashed out lightning fast, the fingers snipping closed just in front of Ronald's lips. He had twitched his tongue back into his mouth the moment Anko had moved. Between the two of them, Naruto squeaked. "Guys, let me go before you start flirting." Two fists crashed into the top of his head, sending him down to the floor. He rolled forward through Ronald's legs, snatching up his staff. The boy stood up slowly, using the staff to pull himself upright. He looked at the two ninja and gulped. The two were advancing slowly on him, their eyes flashing dangerously. Naruto bolted through the door next to him, and shot to the table. He plopped down at it, and smiled innocently at them. Both of them glared at him before sighing. "We're not going to get you to believe we're not together like that, are we?" Anko glared at him as Ronald spoke. The innocent smile on Naruto's face grew slightly wider as he nodded. The older male sighed deeply and shook his head before there was beeping sound from the left of the table. Ronald walked over to an oven there and opened it, pulling out a hot pan of cinnamon rolls. Both of the people at the table had their mouths began watering as the smell from the rolls wafted to their noses. 4 eyes locked onto Ronald as he pulled a knife from a cabinet and began laying an icing onto each roll. When he moved them from the pan to a large serving platter, Anko and Naruto began pounding their fists on the table. A glare from the cook got them to stop, but not before the table had warped slightly. Ronald laid the platter on the table in the center and sat down. He reached forward and snagged a roll, watching as the two others devoured theirs. He chuckled. "That good, guys?" He grinned when Anko kicked his leg and kept eating. Naruto ate 4 rolls and snagged 7 more, causing his 2 housemates to raise their eyebrows. He stuck his tongue out at them, jerking it back before Anko's nails could catch it, and then sealed the cinnamon rolls into a scroll he laid on the table. The boy stood up and pushed his chair in before walking to the door. He paused there, one hand on the doorframe. He looked back at Ronald and Anko, who were still eating, and waved. "Wish me luck." Instead of saying anything, Ronald bent over and picked up the staff, which Naruto had forgotten again. He tossed it to the boy, who blushed as he caught it. Anko merely stuck out her tongue at Naruto, who grinned as he headed towards the academy. He bent over laughing when he heard a startled screech, and kept walking. In the house, Anko was glaring at Ronald, who had her tongue caught between his thumb and forefinger. He chuckled as he twisted it slightly before letting go. "Not so funny when it's your tongue, is it?" She reached over and smacked the back of his head and twisted his ear. "Now that wasn't nice, Ronnie. Keep doing that, and this time, it was her head that was smacked." She pouted at him as he shook a finger in front of her face. "Behave, Anko-chan. Well, let's go find out what the old man has for us today." The woman scowled and the pout grew larger until Ronald tapped it with one finger. She sighed and stood up, then went to get ready. Ronald got up and walked over to a counter and picked up a pot that had been brewing on the stovetop. He set the pot down on the counter and got out 2 bottles, pouring the contents of the pot into the bottles. He closed the thermoses and set the empty pot into the sink. He leaned back against the counter and rubbed his eyes tiredly. He looked around the kitchen before walking up the stairs himself to get ready. Naruto strode into the classroom early as usual. He went back and sat down near the end of the room at what had become his seat in the past year. The would-be genin stared at the ceiling as he tilted his chair back. "It's been almost a full year since I first came to this class, and I've made 5 friends?" He chuckled and shook his head as he leaned the staff against the wall. From a pouch came the scroll with the cinnamon rolls sealed in it. He watched as the other students filed in, barely able to contain their excitement about this auspicious day. When Shino and Hinata came in, Naruto waved them over. The 2 accepted cinnamon rolls gladly. Hinata bit into hers and squeaked. Naruto, why you need to tell why our bro brother that he makes really gg good rolls." The blonde boy blinked and deciphered the girl's stuttering. Finally he nodded. "Of course, Hinata." She sat down beside him. Both of them turned when they heard a loud buzzing from Shino. The Aburame boy looked at Naruto from behind the dark glasses. "That good, Shino?" The Kikeichu host nodded and settled in on Naruto's other side. "Who are the other 3 for Naruto?" Naruto tilted his head as Shikamaru and Choji walked in. The sleepy genius walked over and sat down in front of Naruto's desk. Naruto watched as the pineapple-haired boy laid his head down on the desk. The blonde student jerked his head to get his friend's attention, then picked up a roll. He set it down on top of Shikamaru's open hand, then bent over and whistled directly into Shikamaru's ear. The spike-haired boy sat bolt upright, his hand shooting to his ear. Sadly, he didn't realize there was something on his hand, and ended up flattening the cinnamon roll on his ear. He glared at Naruto, who couldn't help laughing at the sight of icing and cinnamon powder dripping from the Nara's ear. The others were laughing from behind them. Naruto put one hand up placatingly and picked up a second roll. He placed it in front of Shikamaru. The boy grabbed the bottom of Naruto's coat and wiped his ear on it. He ignored the scowl Naruto sent his way and picked up his roll and bit into it savagely. Naruto shook his head again and went back around to his desk and sat down. He blinked and tossed the roll over to Chuji, who took it gratefully. When Kiba came in, Naruto chucked a pair of rolls over to him. Kiba devoured the first and was about to bite into the second when Naruto's voice stopped him. Dog boy, that one is for Akamaru. Kiba blinked and rubbed the back of his head sheepishly, then held the cinnamon roll behind his head. A furry snout shot up and pulled the roll down. Kiba walked over and sat beside Shikamaru as sounds of noisy munching came from his hood. So, are you guys ready? Today is our last day here. And I sure as hell don't want to repeat. He high-fived Chuji over Shikamaru's back, then spun his chair around and faced Naruto. No, are we gonna get to see you put the duck ass in his place again? Kiba jerked his head around at their group. No, you've been holding back since the first day. Naruto looked around, blinking. Everyone from the group was staring at him expectantly. Kiba speaks for all of you, doesn't he? At their nods, the boy sighed. Fine. I'll knock him down a peg or two. It shouldn't be that hard, especially if he's actually been showing off with everything he can do. He grinned maliciously. Now then, who wants to place bets on our teams? Shikamaru was the only one who pulled out money. Everyone else saw the boy genius place a bet, and didn't want any of it. Naruto grinned. Ah, come on guys. So, Shika, what's your bet? Ino, Shika, Cho trio. And I'd say that Hinata, Kiba and Shino get put together. You. He watched as Naruto pulled out a matching amount. With the way my luck's been since coming back to this toe, I'd say I get stuck with the Banshee and Duckass himself. A third pile was placed next to Naruto and Shikamaru's. Kiba's voice rang out. No way, Naruto. They wouldn't put you with two people that you want to kill. I say that you get put on a team with Shino and Shikamaru. The money was collected by Shino, who stated that as an impartial judge, he would decide who won. As no one had really bet against Shikamaru, his money was returned. The group had to scatter to their seats when Irika walked in. The class quieted down instantly when he showed up, fearing the big head technique he used when they didn't. A few paces behind Irika came the silver-haired Mizuki. Irika walked to the front of the room while Mizuki stood by the door. Alright class, today is the day of the Genin exams. On the Hokage's order, we are foregoing the paper exam in favor of a series of practical exams. First up is the combat skills exam. Everyone file outside. Irika blinked after he finished speaking. The room was vacant. He looked over at Mizuki, who was spinning dizzily. I think they're anxious, Irika-kun. The Chunin spoke when he was standing upright. He proceeded out of the classroom while Irika looked around at the empty desks. While they're all grown up. Hard to believe that we may soon be getting a new crop of ninja added to our ranks. I wonder who will pass. The spike-haired Chunin strode out, lost in thought. Academy training grounds. Alright class, first to fight is Kiba vs Tentronu. The feral-looking boy hopped into the ring. A plain, nondescript boy dressed in tans walked into the ring as well. Hey teach, what are the rules? Kiba barked out the question. Irika tilted his head and thought for a moment. No jutsu, and no partners in these fights. We want to see your physical combat skills. Kiba nodded and whispered something into his hood. Akamaru hopped out and trotted over to Naruto, who picked the dog up and set him on his head. They turned to watch as Kiba dropped into a low crouch. Tentronu moved into the basic academy taijutsu stance, and several of the group of friends shook their heads, knowing what was coming. Alright boys, Hajime. Irika's hand dropped down, and Kiba leapt forward. Tentronu ran forward, swinging one arm up to block Kiba's jump, his other preparing to strike. His eyes widened in pain when Kiba's sharpened nails lanced into the flesh on his arm. He tried punching anyway, ignoring the pain. Kiba's right leg snapped up and hit the other boy's fist away before his foot whipped out and slammed into Tentronu's stomach. The nails still in Tentronu's arm left bloody furrows as the boy was sent flying. He slammed into a tree outside of the ring. Kiba landed on the ground and rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Did I go too far? Irika blinked and shook his head slowly. I have got to tell Lord Hokage just how easily the Academy Taijutsu style can be beaten. That was just embarrassing. Kiba walked back over to his friends, when Naruto handed Akamaru back to him. The next few matches passed in blurs, the clan heirs easily winning their matches, though none quite as violently as Kiba. Chuji's did come close though, because his opponent nearly crapped himself when the Akamichi boy tripped him and jumped up to do a body slam. Finally, there was only one clan heir left needing a fight, and only one student other than him who hadn't fought. Alright, now for the last match. Will Sasuke and Irika paused to check over the list in his hands. Will Sasuke and Naruto enter the ring? The two boys stepped into the ring. Naruto's group of friends were discreetly crossing their fingers as they watched the match intently. Sasuke settled into the interceptor fist stance easily. His cold black eyes watched as Naruto stepped on the other side of the ring lightly, the metal staff gripped in one hand. Hey Iruka-sensei! The dobe is using a weapon! Naruto rubbed the bridge of his nose when this screech reached his ears. Before he could say anything, Iruka responded. Sakura-san. A weapon is perfectly viable so long as it is not thrown. Now please be quiet so we can start. The girl growled under her breath but went quiet. Hajime. Iruka's hand fell, and everyone tensed, expecting a repeat of the explosive start to the matches. Instead, either boy moved as Naruto and Sasuke locked eyes. It's not too late to give up, dobe, the onyx-eyed boy said in a dead tone. The audience's eyes switched over to Naruto to see how he took that. To their surprise, he bent over laughing. Sasuke took a step back, thrown off by this response to his taunt. Is the dobe laughing at me? His eyes tightened as a rage settled over him. He dashed forward, aiming to stop just outside of Naruto's range and make him overextend to try hitting him. Unfortunately for the Uchiha, he had forgotten that Naruto was holding a staff. The metal lunged forward and thumped into his chest, knocking him back several paces. He reached one hand up and began rubbing the spot, wincing slightly. All through this, Naruto had not stopped laughing. As Sasuke was recovering, the blonde-haired boy finally got his laughter under control. You're right, duckass. It isn't too late for you to give up. Naruto straightened up and slid his trench coat off. He tossed it over to Hinata, who caught it easily. The boy looked over at Sasuke as he began spinning his staff end over end. He watched as Sasuke's eyes trailed after one end of the staff, the black orbs locked onto the glint of metal. Suddenly Naruto lashed the staff against the ground, causing Sasuke to leap back. The metal was driven into the ground by almost half its length. Naruto stepped up onto it and stared down at Sasuke. This is how far above you I am, Sasuke. Normally I wouldn't make a big deal about it, but his eyes flickered over to his friends and he shrugged. Someone asked that I make an exception. The Uchiha snarled and dashed forward, his hands lancing in to strike Naruto's legs. The blonde-haired boy flipped over Sasuke and landed behind him, their backs almost touching. He spun around and hooked one leg around the Uchiha's and pushed against his other side. Sasuke spun around Naruto's leg and thudded into the dirt. He came up and spat a wad of dirt and saliva out and growled at Naruto, who merely cocked one eyebrow. Show me what you got, Uchiha. Hey, Iruka-sensei, can the Uchiha and I go all out and have you grade us on our other categories from this fight? The two boys looked over at Iruka, who nodded. Naruto turned back to look at Sasuke only to be met by a fireball racing towards him. Reacting quickly, Naruto dropped to the ground. He wasn't quick enough to avoid the flame entirely as his shirt was burned away and he suffered mild burns on his chest. The blonde fighter flipped over and pushed off the ground, his leg flying up to intercept Sasuke's fist. The hand connected with the heel of Naruto's foot and a loud crack echoed through the area. Naruto jumped to his feet and winced. He's not too bad. If he wasn't half out of his mind from my taunting, this would be a lot more difficult. It doesn't help that he's fire-natured. Maybe I should have listened to Ronaldizan and tried to break my elementalist habit? He bounced on his feet, testing out what the impact had done. A slight sprain. Not too serious, but I'm going to be hampered by that. Alright, time to kick it up a notch. Sasuke blinked when Naruto's hand lashed out and grabbed the staff to his left. He braced himself for his opponent to use it, and tilted his head confusedly when Naruto tossed it out of the ring. He was about to open his mouth to ridicule the other when Naruto opened a small black scroll and nipped his thumb, swiping the bloody pad across the seal. Naruto caught the weapon that emerged from it and grinned. Sorry, duckass, but my staff is a bit too unwieldy to use for my jutsu. Sasuke grimaced at what that meant before sliding his hand around to a pouch on his hip. He pulled out a trio of shuriken and flashed through a series of hand seals. Kaiten, Hosenka no Jutsu. He spat a trio of small fireballs from his mouth, flinging the shuriken directly behind each one. On Naruto's side, he flashed through his own series of hand seals. He had to grin when he heard Sasuke speak. Faye, some genius hasn't even figured out that shouting the name of his tech is really a genin move. Let's see how he likes this. Futon, Kamaitachi no Jutsu. Naruto lashed his weapon down, the blade-like form of the wood unleashing a trail of wind. The wind attack negated the equal-ranked fire attack, something that caused Iruka and Mizuki's eyes to widen. Naruto had to react quickly to deflect the shuriken that had been hidden behind the flames. He reached into his own pouch and pulled out his own trio of shuriken. Not bad, didn't expect the shuriken. Should have though. Alright, my turn to mess with my weapons. Futon, Yadama Furisugiyo. Naruto threw the weapons as a group, and watched as Sasuke dodged them. He grinned and channeled his will into the technique, the shuriken looping around in the air and hurtling back in at the unsuspecting boy. Over on the sidelines, Sakura had followed the weapons, distracted by the shine from them. She saw what Sasuke missed, and was about to shout out a warning when a large hand clamped over her mouth. She looked up into Chuji's eyes. Now Haruno, no interference from the audience. He wagged a finger in front of her face, and kept his hand over his mouth. In the ring, Sasuke had cocked his head and shrugged. The dead last was just standing there, inviting an attack, so he obliged and pulled out a cluster of kunai. Naruto formed a pair of hand seals, then went back to staring vacantly. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu / Kawarimi no Jutsu. He shimmered for a moment before steadying, which caused the Uchiha to blink as he threw the kunai, to which he chuckled when Naruto kicked a stone at him. Then the shuriken hit. He screamed out as the metal prongs bit into his flesh, one in his shoulder, the other two thudding into his lower back. He collapsed to the ground and was about to struggle up when he felt something press against his temple. Slam. You're dead. He looked up and saw Naruto standing there. What? How? We saw you get hit by those kunai. Naruto looked up at Ino and snorted. What you all saw get hit was a Kage Bunshin. I had Kawarimi with it, and hinged into the stone the clone kicked at Duckass here. Face it, your precious Uchiha lost. Iruka nodded. He lost, but you both pass your exams with flying colors. Naruto, how did that wind jutsu cancel out Sasuke's fire jutsu? Naruto beamed. Because Duckass weakened it. The Hozenka is, in essence, the Gokaku jutsu split apart. The Gokaku would have swallowed my wind sickle, but since each fireball was actually a third as strong as the wind technique, mine won. Naruto slid the truncheon back into the seal scroll and offered a hand to the Uchiha to help him up. He sighed when Sasuke slapped his hand away and struggled to his feet feebly. The blonde-haired boy slid behind the other and pulled his shuriken out of the Uchiha's back before sealing them into a separate scroll. Need to clean those before I put them back with the others. He walked over to his friends and looked at them. Well? Kiba slapped him on the back and grinned. Way to go, man. That's what I'm talking about. Similar compliments came from the others, with a stuttering Hinata handing Naruto back his coat. The other tests passed by in a daze for the blondie, his mind noting only when one of his friends was passing a test. The class was taken back inside as the teachers went to grade. Mizuki took the second half of the group to grade with Iruka taking the first half. In the grading room, Mizuki chuckled darkly when he figured out how he could get his scheme to work. On the front of Naruto's paper, he wrote fail in heavy kanji. Underneath it, he wrote a message to Naruto requesting the boy to speak with him after class. He exited the room at the same time Iruka emerged from his, the two chunin nodding to each other. The teachers passed out the papers quickly, then dismissed the class. Naruto had flipped his paper over after receiving it, and waved his friends out before him. He waited patiently, ignoring Iruka's confused look. When Mizuki left, Naruto followed the silver-haired chunin out. The man motioned for Naruto to enter an empty classroom. You're probably wondering why you failed, right? Well, it's because you can't manage to make a bunshin. I know it seems harsh, but you can't pass this test with a Kage Bunshin. The man patted the boy on the shoulder sympathetically. Naruto sighed. Well, there's always next year. I guess maybe I can make a bunshin by then. He started to leave when Mizuki's voice made him pause. Now Naruto-kun, I said you couldn't pass this test. There is an alternative though. Naruto whipped around, a pleading expression settling onto his face. Mizuki chuckled in his mind at the gullibility of the boy. I can have him get the scroll, then burn him. I'll say the scroll burned when he did. I'll have the scroll like master wants, and I'll be the hero of the town. He explained the test to Naruto, who nodded eagerly and agreed. When the silver-haired man left, Naruto slapped his palm to his face. Does Mizuki think I am that stupid? The only scroll the old man would keep in his office is the forbidden scroll of sealing. I'd better let Gigi know there's a traitor. Maybe Aniki and Enkonichan have an idea? He headed back towards his house swiftly. The apartment complex. Naruto pushed open the door and called out. Aniki? Nei-chan? Anyone home? He grinned in relief when he heard singing coming from upstairs. Aniki must be cleaning again. He hurried up the stairs to Ronald's floor. Aniki, I need to talk to you, and it's really important. Ronald tilted one eye down to Naruto, then dropped to the floor. He laid the cleaning rag in his hand on a table and leaned against the wall. What's up, kiddo? Speaking quickly, Naruto told Ronald what Mizuki had asked him to do. The shinobi leaned against the wall and tapped his chin. Here's what we'll do, Naruto-kun. We'll tell the Hokage, and request permission to set a trap. Sound good? Naruto smiled and nodded happily. Ronald laid one hand on the boy's shoulder, and the two vanished in a swirl of winds. Later that day. Shinobi and Kunoichi, your task is to hunt down Uzumaki Naruto. He has stolen the forbidden scroll of sealing. I need not warn you of the danger that he tampers with the seal on him, and accidentally releases the Kyubi no Kitsune. Go! The ninja vanished, hunting for the boy. Iruka had hung back, seeing Ronald near the Hokage. Ronald-san, can you tell me what's going on? People should know better than to try tricking a fox, that's all I'll say. Ronald chuckled, then leapt away. Iruka watched him go, confused. His little brother just stole one of the most important scrolls in our village, and he isn't freaking out? Something is going on here. I've got to find Naruto. The man shook his head and took off, searching for the boy. Woods outside Konoha. Naruto slumped against a tree, panting. I finally got it down. Wonder who is going to find me first, rather, after the NBU up in that tree I mean. He chuckled, wondering if Mizuki had fallen for the deception. When there was a rustle behind Naruto, he guessed that Mizuki had. So, when he turned around and saw Mizuki, he blinked in shock. Wrong sensei, oh. Naruto! Why did you steal the forbidden scroll? The boy though fast. Forbidden scroll? But Iruka-sensei, Mizuki-sensei told me where to. This was when he told me the secondary mission. Mizuki? Why would Mizuki tell Naruto about the mission? Naruto, what Ms? Ah, there you are, Naruto! Now complete your mission and hand over the scroll you have in your hands. Crap, Iruka's here. Screw it, I'll burn him and say the demon killed him. Hee. Naruto! There isn't a secondary mission. Naruto turned back and forth between the two, adopting a confused look. I'm sorry to deceive you, Iruka-sensei, but we have to get the traitor and I want to show him my move. But Iruka-sensei, Mizuki-sensei told me that I could become a genin if I mastered a move from this scroll, and I did. Now I have to give him the scroll and show him the move to pass. Naruto turned and was about to climb up the tree beside Mizuki when Iruka's voice rang out. Naruto, stop! He must be a traitor. The silver-haired man snarled when he saw that Iruka had figured it out. Naruto, do you know why the village hates you? He grinned when he saw Iruka's face pale. The man ran up the tree, only to have a Fuma shuriken slam into his gut. Mizuki dropped his arm to his side as Iruka coughed up blood. He missed the shadow that passed over Naruto's face, and the hand seals the boy made. Iruka didn't, and tilted his head slightly. He latched back onto what Mizuki had said. Mizuki, you cough can't. It's forbidden. Naruto walked over to Mizuki. Why, sensei, I'll give you this if you tell me why. The boy's voice sounded hollow. The silver-haired man grinned triumphantly. Because Naruto, you are a demon. You hold the Kyubi no Kitsune. A branch fell and landed on Iruka, dislodging the Fuma shuriken. A mouth formed on the branch. Relax, Iruka-sensei, I know he's a traitor. And so does Gigi. Iruka looked up in shock. That was Naruto's voice, but the boy was standing by Mizuki, holding tight to the scroll in his hands. Iruka's eyes widened when Naruto slowly handed the scroll to Mizuki. The man grinned maliciously, and his hands flashed through a chain of seals. Intense blue flames lanced from his mouth, incinerating the boy in front of him. Foolish demon! I got you! He looked down, in his glee forgetting the man to his side. Mizuki pulled the scroll open, his head rearing back when he saw a picture of an orange fox on the papyrus. Both men blinked in shock when the scroll clearly said in Naruto's voice, boom. The scroll exploded, throwing Mizuki onto a tree, impaling him on a branch. NBU units dropped down beside him. Chunin teacher Mizuki. You are under arrest for the betrayal of Konohagakure, the attempted murder of Yumino Iruka, the attempted murder of Uzumaki Naruto, and the attempted theft of the forbidden scroll of sealing. Verdict: guilty. Punishment: Hokage-sama? Mizuki's eyes widened in fear when the Hokage stepped out on the ground beneath him. You know the rules, Tora-san. Execution. A wet thunk sounded out, and Mizuki's head dropped to the forest floor beside Sarutobi. The branch on Iruka's chest exploded into smoke, a hand reaching out of it to pull out the Fuma shuriken. Ne Iruka-sensei, do I pass? The cheeky voice he thought he would never hear again came from the smoke. As it faded, Naruto was grinning. The boy helped Iruka to the ground, where the man knelt in front of the Hokage. Sarutobi blinked and gestured for Naruto to help Iruka stand. Yumino-san, Naruto came to me with his older brother a few hours ago, and told me of Mizuki failing him for using the Kage Bunshin. They then informed me that Mizuki had told Naruto that if he could steal the forbidden scroll and learn a jutsu from it, he would pass. We set this trap to catch the traitor, and it worked beautifully, albeit that we did not intend for you to get injured. Does the boy pass, Yumino-kun? Sarutobi grinned, his eyes closing. With shaky hands, Iruka reached up and pulled his hataide off and tied it around Naruto's forehead. The boy shrieked with joy and tackled Iruka, who gasped in pain. Naruto, the boy blushed and stepped back. Gigi, can I take him to the hospital? Hiruzen nodded, and the boy helped Iruka limp towards the hospital, the duo speeding up when they realized that Iruka was in danger of blood loss. Your boy is growing up fine, Minato. How I wish you could see him. The man looked around the clearing and sighed. Damn. This means more paperwork. He rubbed the bridge of his nose as he gestured for the ANBU to clean the area and proceeded back to his office. Apartment complex, 5 days later. Naruto sat staring at Ronald and Anko, who were both regarding him sadly. You heard us right, brat. You'll likely be assigned to the Uchiha and the Haruno. Lord Hokage says that the reason is because you are the dead last due to your prolonged absence. If you had been around. The blonde genin shook his head sadly. If I had stayed here, I'd still be the dead last Anko-nichin. The teachers would have sabotaged me, and because they wouldn't have been able to always kick me out of class, the other students would have been sabotaged as well. While the heirs would have been fine since they were also receiving training at home, the civilian and smaller clan members would have been in trouble. The purple-haired woman sighed. A boy this young should not have to be so mature. She looked over at the man who called himself Naruto's older brother, and wondered what the man had done while raising the boy for him to turn out like this. The person she was watching looked up and returned the stare. Guys, seriously, you two stare at each other all the time. Why don't you make it easy on all of your friends and admit that you like each other? Both of the older ninja whipped their heads around to glare at Naruto, who was grinning to himself. Oh damn, they're mad at me again. Snicker like that's something new. At least I managed to distract them. His grin widened at his feeling of accomplishment. The boy hated it when Anko gained that pitying look. Ronald had broken himself of it after a few months of knowing the boy, but the woman who had moved in with them had yet to do so. Ronald rocked his chair back out of the way when Anko launched herself across the table, tuning out the sounds of scuffling coming from the other side of the table. Ignoring the screams of not there. Dear Cammy, I want to have kids later, psycho lady. He studied the ceiling, wondering what the old man's real intentions for putting Naruto on a team with the only two people he despised in his class. His attention was brought back when Naruto shrieked. Not the mouse. He decided it was time to intervene before Anko scarred his younger brother. He reached out with one hand and grabbed the back of Anko's coat and hauled her back, not realizing what would happen when she fell from the table. She landed on his lap, blinking. Anko looked at where she was and blushed heavily. The special jounin squeaked and leapt off of Ronald, running up the stairs. Both of the males remaining downstairs looked after her, one with confusion, the other with a widening grin. See? Told you two like each other. Ronald pulled the claymore from its hanging scabbard and smacked the blonde boy on the head with the flat of the blade. He sat back, unaware of the blush on his own face. Damn it, Naruto. I do like her, but she freaks out every time we touch. He shook his head violently, then jerked his head up the stairs. Go get ready, Ototo. You don't want to be late to the team assignments. Who knows, maybe the old geezer changed his mind. Despite his words, the man did not believe that had happened, and it was evident from Naruto's expression that the boy did not either. With a slow nod, the boy stood up and trekked up to his room, his feet dragging heavily across the floors. Ronald him walk up with his face set in a blank stare. He could read the worry in the boy's shoulders. Finally the Chunin stood up and cracked his neck. Don't worry, Otsuto. I'm going to go talk to the old man to see what his reasoning is. Ronald walked up the stairs to his floor to prepare himself. When he passed Anko's room, he tilted his head and paused. Inside was a rhythmic chanting. The young man recognized the tempo and shuddered. She's plotting something. That's her laughter for when she is planning something big. He continued on to his own room. Later that day. Konoha Academy, room 210. The group of friends sat watching the clock. Today, everyone had arrived early, even the Uchiha. It was team assignment day, and no one wanted to risk being left out or forgotten. And there was also the undercurrent of anticipation, with everyone waiting with bated breath to find out who was put on their team. The clock on the rear wall chimed the hour, and everyone spun to face the front of the class. Iruka walked in slowly, his steps faltering slightly because of the partially healed injury. After arriving at his desk at the front of the classroom, he sank wearily into the seat and folded his arms on the tabletop, his eyes sliding across the room of students contemplatively. Well, this is it, everyone. Today is team assignment day. When I read your name, the two people in your team will most likely become the most important people in your life. I'll start at the top. Team 1 is Hokage's office. Damn it, old man. You're putting him on the worst possible team. Both of those people hate him. Rano slapped the desk in front of Sarutobi. The leader of the village looked troubled for a moment before rising to turn to look out through the large window behind him. Reikuin, is it really so bad? Ronald paused and snorted. That bad? Yes. The Uchiha is constantly looking for excuses to fight Naruto, and at times would have used lethal force if an instructor hadn't been around. The Haruno criticizes everything Naruto does, trying to get him expelled. Why would you put him on their team? Because I requested Naruto. I think their rivalry would be good for Sasuke. Both Sarutobi and Rana looked at the door. Get out, Hataki. This meeting does not concern you. Ronald spat the words out, full of contempt for the man. The silver-haired Jounin wagged his finger in front of Ronald's face like the Chunin was a young child being reprimanded. Oh, but it does. You have an issue with my team, so you have an issue with me. Ronald was gearing up to tear into Kakashi when the Hokage's voice lashed out. Enough, both of you. Sit down and behave like shinobi, not children. The two men glared at each other as they obeyed their leader. Now then, Naruto is going to remain on the team. Ronald sat upright about to interject, on a probationary status. If things do not settle down for the team, there will be a restructuring, if need be apprenticeships for both Naruto and Sasuke, with Sakura receiving an additional year as she and the Yamanaka heir are the two who are most unfit for duty. And Hataki, the Haruno girl, is your responsibility, seeing as you requested her as well. Dismissed Kakashi. The silver-haired man stood up with a smirk on his face and vanished in a swirl of wind. Do you have anything further to say, Rei-san? Ronald nodded. I do. That man is not interested in training a team, he intends to train the Uchiha. He said it himself, he requested Naruto because he thinks the two will have a rivalry. I bet he chose the Haruno to give Uchiha support. Mark my words, those two will receive little training from that man. The Hokage stared at Ronald for a moment, then tilted his head to the door. Ronald stood up and bowed coldly, then walked out. You will end up regretting giving in to Hataki's request. Konoha Academy. Team 7 will be. Iruka froze as he read the names on the paper. He swallowed visibly, then looked up at Naruto, his expression full of sympathy. Uzumaki-Rei Naruto. The boy sank his head onto the desk, knowing full well what was coming from the expression. Uchiha Sasuke kept aside and watched as Shino pulled out the money from the bet and began tapping it against the table. And Haruno Sakura. Your Jounin-sensei will be Hataki Kakashi. The classroom was dead quiet. The only sound was Shino's footsteps as he walked over to Naruto's desk and laid the prize money down. The Abirame laid a hand on Naruto's shoulder in a consoling manner, then walked back to his desk. A rhythmic thud could be heard a few minutes after that. Hinata looked down and blinked to see Naruto lifting his head up and dropping it to the desk. The thud sound continued through the rest of team assignments. Team 8 will be Akimichi Tsuji, Shikamaru Nara, and Yamanaka Ino. Your Jounin instructor will be Sarutobi Asuma. Iruka wished he could tell Naruto it was a joke as he watched a cut open on the boy's forehead. It healed right away, but the boy kept relentlessly pounding. Team 9 is still active, so Team 10 will be Abirame Shino, Hyuga Hinata, and Inazuka Kiba. Your team leader will be Yahi Kurinai. Teams 1 through 5 stay here, teams 6 through 10 return after lunch. The man stood up and walked out, unable to bear watching Naruto bash his head against the table anymore. As soon as Iruka was out of the room, the whole group of friends rushed to Naruto. Tsuji and Kiba grabbed the back of the blonde boy's head, while Hinata gripped his ears. Shikamaru grabbed him in the shadow hold as Shino grabbed Naruto's ponytail. Despite all of his friends' methods of holding him back, Naruto's skull met the desk again, shocking the people who had remained in the class. Hinata changed her tactics and jabbed several tenketsu on Naruto's neck, immobilizing him. The others let go, only to resume their grips when Naruto slowly trembled upwards. Uzumaki-Rei Naruto. That is enough. A sharp retort cracked through the room, making the group look to the front. Enko was standing there, her face hard. What would your brother say if he saw you like this? The boy's face hardened before sagging. He stood up slowly and looked at his friends. Ramen guys? I'll meet you there. They nodded and walked towards Ichiraku's while Naruto walked up to Enko. Nei-chan, where is Aniki? He asked the question softly. Enko rubbed his hair before answering. He went up to the old man to protest this. If he can, he'll be getting your team changed. Naruto's face lit up when he heard that. If anyone could get this changed, it was Rano. Moving suddenly, he wrapped his arms around Enko's waist, then took off towards the ramen shop. After a moment, Enko looked towards the wall. Why didn't you tell him you were here? A portion of the wall faded, revealing a large man with a pair of swords. The students still in the class fainted in their seats, drawing a contemptuous snort from the present ninja. The man walked over to Enko and wrapped an arm around her waist. We should get out of here. It wouldn't do to have scared all the rookies senseless before their sensei could even get here. The duo faded into a shimmer of wind. Ichiraku's ramen stand. Naruto slid onto a stool between Shino and Hinata that they had left open for him. Naruto-kun, we have yet to order. We decided it would be polite to wait for you to start. Naruto grinned and clapped Shino on the shoulder before looking over at Ayam. He held up 3 fingers. 3 Uzumaki specials, Ayam-chan. Everyone there blinked. Even Naruto would be hard-pressed to finish 3 of the massive bowls of mixed ramen. They were also slightly worried, as Naruto did not order more than 1 unless he was upset and needing comfort. Hinata wrapped her arm around his right arm. Oniai-san, please cheer up. Dead silence hung in the shop as everyone, including Ayam and Tucci, stared at Hinata. A single thought ran through their minds simultaneously. Did Hinata just speak without stuttering? The girl who was the focus of their attention blushed. WWWWHWHWH what? The stutter had returned, throwing everyone off. Naruto shifted his arm so he was holding the brunette's shoulders in a loose hug. I'll be fine, Emuto-san. Aniki is trying to get Gigi to change his mind about my team. The group relaxed at that. Everyone turned to order their own ramen. Things won't go well if Rei-san can't get Naruto's team changed. I doubt they'll just randomly switch the teams. The old man seemed pretty intent on having me paired with Chuji and Ino. Shikamaru grunted and rested his chin on his palm, muttering Mendokosai. Who could Naruto get paired with if they did change the teams? I can't think of anyone who would match him well enough. Wait, what if he got that could work? A ghost of a smile crossed the lips of the lazy genius. The curtains ruffled as a pair of figures walked in. Naruto heard the footsteps and his head sank. Kiba and Akamaru's hackles rose. Dobe, you better not hold me back too much. Yeah. Sasuke-kun is such a better shinobi than you are. A finger jabbed Naruto's shoulder. Hinata's hand snapped out and grabbed Naruto's wrist and held it placatingly while Shino and Kiba stood up and moved between Naruto and the new arrivals. Ayam and Tucci pulled into the back of the shop when they felt the tension rise. Kikeichu crawled out of Shino's jacket and Akamaru leapt to the ground in front of Kiba. Chuji stood up and cracked his shoulders. All of you, settle down. Sit the fuck down, brats. Ma, am I interrupting something? 3 voices came from the entrance together, causing the rookie group there to freeze in their places. Faces turned to look at the entrance where 3 ninjas stood, 2 looking angrily at the group, the third holding an orange book that made Naruto growl when he recognized it. Rano and Enko walked over to the stand and grabbed the back of the boys' jackets. Rano hoisted Akamaru into the air and placed him in Kiba's hood again, then sat the boy down in one of the open seats. Enko did the same with the boy she was holding. A glare sent Sasuke and Sakura out of the shop. Kakashi looked at the group, then sighed and walked out after the 2 children. The Chunin and Special Jounin watched the Jounin stalk out with his nose buried in the pervert book before looking at Naruto. The boy had managed to get his ramen from an Ayam who had emerged from the rear of the shop tentatively, and was currently devouring it. Rano placed one hand on Naruto's head and shook his head at the other children's inquiring looks. The blonde boy ignored his adoptive older brother and kept eating, slurping noisily on the broth. When he finished, he closed his eyes with a contented grunt. His head tilted back and the blue eyes opened to look up at Rano. The elder male's eyes tightened, and a brief hand sign later, the 2 were gone. Everyone who remained focused on Enko, who blinked and mentally cursed. Damn that man. Now everyone is going to be bugging me. The woman sank onto the stool where Naruto had been and began explaining what had happened. Hokage Monument, Sandame's head. Wind and leaves swirled on top of Sarutobi's head, depositing Naruto and Rano. The boy said nothing as he strode out to the edge of the cliff and stared across the village. For a while, neither even attempted to speak, but Naruto was never known for being able to stay silent when upset. His voice was as cold as a glacier when he finally did speak. So you couldn't get it changed, could you? More of a statement than a question, it sent a pang into Rano's heart. He stepped forward and laid his hand on Naruto's shoulder, and flinched when the boy stepped away from him. No, I couldn't. The Hokage refused to change the teams. However, he trailed off to see if Naruto was interested. The normally vibrant blue eyes of the boy turned to look at him, twisting the older shinobi's heart again to see that they seemed dull. However, what? I was able to get him to make it probationary. And I did find out why you were put on that team. There was a spark in the eyes. Why? And explain about the probationary part of the team. Rano grinned to himself. Naruto was still in there, just trying to cope with it in his own way. Okay, the reason you were put on the team is because you were requested by Hatake Kakashi. It's not widely known among the Genin and lower Chunin, but it is in the bingo books, that man is known as the copycat of Konoha. The reason He has the Sharingan. My guess is that he requested Sasuke as the only person who could train him in the use of the Sharingan when, if, it activates. He handpicked you, and the Haruno Naruto grimaced as Ronald spoke, and cut his hand in the air. Skip to explaining about the probationary. If we were handpicked to be on the Dukasa's team, I can figure out why. You see it too, eh? Apparently the Hokage didn't. Anyway, about the probationary status. I asked about it after leaving the old coot, and found out this. There have been times before when teams were formed that didn't necessarily work well together. There is even an instance of a shinobi going rogue simply because he was put on a team he hated. So, the probationary assignments were designed. You will be working with them for missions, up till your first one above C rank. If, after that mission, it is seen that you do not work well with your team, a change will occur. The Hokage mentioned you and the Uchiha getting put into apprenticeships with members of the village. Naruto turned back to look out at the village and sighed heavily. So, no matter what, I have to work with them until we get a B rank mission? His eyes hardened at a realization. Aniki, what if that guy, Hataki, keeps us doing C ranks to avoid getting us split up? Ronald grinned evilly. I asked about that too when I realized that. There was an addendum at the end of the document, amending that to first mission above C rank, or completion of 7 C rank missions. Naruto walked back over to Ronald and climbed onto his shoulders. You owe me training. Now I have to get back to the academy to meet this sensei of mine. Ronald grinned. Figures he wants to arrive with a bang. Shuinpa. A line of smoke appeared down the side of the mountain, speeding in zigzags towards the academy. Konoha Academy. Hinata looked around nervously. She had appointed herself to be on the lookout for Naruto, who she thought would be greatly upset by what Ronald had told him. Enko hadn't known of the probationary part, only the reasons for that particular team. Thus, none of the group of friends knew of it either. Suddenly, Hinata blinked. A line of dust was settling down on the Hokage's face, something which confused the girl. It also put her on guard, as the dust was fast approaching where she was. Within seconds of spotting it, Hinata's hair flew up as something sped past her. Her only clue was a fleeting greeting that included her name. She shook her head, realizing that Naruto had convinced Ronald to use his speed method to arrive at the school. She followed the settling dust to their classroom, bowing to Ronald as he stepped out and walked past her. He gave the shy girl a lopsided smile, then headed home. The sight that greeted the Hyuga girl when she walked in made her giggle. Shikamaru and Kiba were propped against the desk, their eyes dazed. Naruto was standing beside them chuckling. Hinata looked at him, and he explained that Ronald had moved right past them, spinning the lighter boys in circles. Kiba had actually fallen over, the reason Akamaru was currently sitting at his feet. Shikamaru had avoided that fate only because he had stumbled against the table, and wisely decided to stay there. Eventually, the group settled down to wait for the arrival of their respective sensei. Naruto clearly avoided sitting near his teammates, preferring the company of Shino and Shikamaru. The three boys, arguably the smartest in their class, and in Shikamaru's case the entire academy, counting faculty too, were debating what teams would have made better choices than the ones they were in now. Look guys, the way they have the teams now is nice, but way too specialized. I mean seriously, look at your team, for example Shinokuin. You yourself are probably the longest range fighter in your group, but you are only good to mid-range. Both Hinata-chan and Kiba are close-range fighters. Your team was designed for scouting and spying. Shino nodded, accepting what Naruto said. Yours isn't much to speak of, Naruto. Sakura has nothing whatsoever in practical terms as a combat skill, and Sasuke right now is barely acceptable among normal shinobi. Hell, you are the saving grace for your team, and the other two members on it would rather die than acknowledge that. Naruto's face soured at Shikamaru's reminder of his teammates. To forestall Naruto complaining at them, Shino spoke. The Inoshikacho Triangle team is an admirable one, but is it not somewhat dated? Shikamaru nodded for the Aburame to continue. If your parents made that team so well known, is it not likely that most of the major villages, and indeed anyone they might have encountered, has prepared for just such an occurrence as their children following in their footsteps? Shika was forced to agree. The three boys sat and stared at the tabletop between them for several minutes. It all comes down to this, guys. How can we get the Lord Hokage to change the teams? Naruto looked up and was about to explain about the probationary status of his team when a man looking faintly like Hiruzen walked into the classroom. A smoldering cigarette dangled from the man's lips as he stared around the classroom. The boys who had turned to look at him took in the fact that he was wearing the standard jounin attire, except that from his waist dangled a pair of trench knives that looked deadly sharp. The trio blinked when the man somehow managed to speak without disrupting the cigarette. All right, Inoshikacho are with me. Meet at training ground 19. He shimmered into wind and vanished. Shikamaru grunted and stood up. He jerked his head at Chuji and Ino before walking out the door. The Akimichi followed his friend easily, munching on a bag of pork rinds that seemed to appear from thin air. Ino squealed one last time before hugging onto Sasuke's arm tightly, then running out of the room shouting at the boys to wait up. Silence hung in the room for a moment before Naruto looked over at Shino and shrugged. "Wanna bet on whose teacher gets here next?" "No bet, my friend. My Kakashi report that there is a woman standing outside the class now. From what your brother and Anko said, your instructor is a man, making the person outside the class my team's sensei." Naruto grunted and watched as the door swung open. Ruby red eyes surveyed the room, tightening when they traveled across the boy with black eyes being clung to by the pink-haired girl. Kakashi had better break her of that. She's a disgrace to Kunoichi the world over. The woman shook her head and continued looking around the room. She grinned happily when she saw Hinata hiding against one wall. "Aburame Shino, Hyuga Hinata, and Inuzuka Kiba, come with me." Kurenai turned and walked out of the room, missing the wolfish look that came from her canine-loving student. Kiba led the way out of the room for Hinata and Shino. The Aburame paused and laid a hand on Naruto's shoulder and squeezed it before following after his team. This left Naruto alone with Sasuke and Sakura. He pointedly ignored them, something that only Sasuke realized. Sakura was busy squealing away about how happy she was that she was on the same team as her Sasuke, to remember that the team had a third member. Naruto sat down near the rear of the room in the lotus position, his mind sinking into itself as he meditated. "Just great. I'm stuck with Duckass and the Shrieker. What did I do to deserve this? Maybe it's because of me? Nah. Gigi wouldn't do that. He has to know what Aniki would do to him if he hurt me because of you. No way he'd risk that." "You have a point. Sorry then, I got nothing." Yes, Naruto was in contact with Kyubi no Kitsune. He had been for some time, as his meditations had quickly led to him discovering the cell near his stomach. The boy and the demon continued conversing, joking with each other about their teammates. 2 hours passed. Even the normally obtuse Sakura had realized that their sensei was late. Sasuke's teeth were clenched with anger at what he perceived to be a grievous insult. Naruto's left eyebrow was twitching in time with his heartbeat as he fingered a saban while looking at the clock. All three had their attention jerked to the door when it creaked open. Sakura squeaked and ducked behind Sasuke, whose face had morphed into a contemptuous sneer. Naruto, though, had flung the saban in his hand, along with 4 others, at the movement. The person who stepped through the door blinked and looked at the other side of his book, staring at the 5 saban that had pierced through the binding material and numerous layers of paper to poke out enough to be seen on the other side. Then the lone eye traveled up. "My first impression, I hate you guys. Up to the roof." He vanished in a swirl of leaves angrily. Naruto snorted and strode over to the window, throwing it open and heading up. Sasuke glared after the dobe and went to the stairs, Sakura trailing behind him confusedly. Konoha Academy roof. Kakashi plucked the 5th saban from his precious book, flinging the needle to the ground with a snarl of disgust. "That little brat had the gall to hurt my precious." The man was lost in his ranting and didn't notice a tanned hand snake out and pick up the needle from where it had fallen. The saban was returned to its container, along with its brethren that had also been retrieved. "You want to know my first impression of you, Hataki-sensei? You're pathetic. You supposedly handpicked the 3 of us, then you are late to meeting us. And don't get upset about your perv book, it's your own fault. Showing up that late, I can't know that you are you. After all, the shinobi and kunoichi I know of this village at your rank are all on time." Kakashi spun around and snarled at Naruto. "Sit down and shut up, brat. How the hell did you get up here without me seeing you? I have a clear line of sight on the door." Naruto snorted and obeyed the order. "I walked up the wall, Hataki-sensei. Something I was told was in the academy's curriculum for all graduating class students. Though I have to doubt just how well the academy taught us, since they never once mentioned wall walking to my class." The conversation was cut short when Sasuke and Sakura arrived on the roof, sitting next to Naruto. Kakashi stared at the blonde boy for a long moment. Fuck. He knows more than Sasuke. That isn't how it's supposed to be. He's supposed to be the dead last, someone that Sasuke can compare himself to and feel better than. He had to force himself out of his musing then, and begin their meeting. "Alright, why don't we begin by introducing ourselves? You go first, Hataki-sensei. I refuse to introduce myself to someone I don't know." Kakashi growled at that but began. "Very well then. I am Hataki Kakashi, Jounin, and your sensei. I like some things, dislike others, such as blonde boys right now. My dreams, I forget those when I wake up, and my goal is to own all the Ika Ika books signed." Naruto rubbed his forehead tiredly when the older man finished speaking. "All I learned is that he is a pervert. And that I already knew. Same for his name. He decided to preempt the older man and spoke quickly to introduce himself. I am Uzumaki Rei Naruto. What I like, none of you could possibly give a damn about, and if I said my dislikes, I have a feeling they would be used against me. My dream, I won't share since I don't feel like being ridiculed, and my goal is to get the hell off this team. He spat derisively when he finished speaking. The rest of his team stared at him incredulously for several moments. Eventually, Kakashi gestured for Sasuke to speak. The boy stood up and rattled off his name, then sat back down. Sakura seized this as her turn to speak. My name is Haruno Sakura. I like Sasuke-kun. She looked at him and blushed heavily. I dislike the dobe. She glared at Naruto. My dream is Meep. The girl blushed heavily, her face turning redder than her shirt before blood erupted from her nose and she passed out. Okay. Meet tomorrow at Training Ground 7. I advise you don't eat. Time is 6:30. Team dismissed. Naruto was gone before Kakashi finished speaking. Sasuke grunted and walked away, casting a dirty look after Naruto. The silver-haired Jounin stared blankly at the ground for some time. This is not good. Naruto is supposed to be an idiot I can compare Sasuke to favorably. Instead, he knows things that Sasuke isn't close to. And he hates us, especially me. And Sakura dislikes him. Oh crap, Sakura. The man looked down at the unconscious form of the pinkette and sighed. He scooped her into his arms and shunshed to her home to leave her at the door. Belt test and team missions. Naruto groaned as he got up the next morning. He quickly dressed himself and re-equipped himself. This day promised to be long, and the sun wasn't even up yet. He sighed and began walking down the stairs, pausing when he heard a quiet sniffling coming from Enko's room. He raised his hand to knock on her door and hesitated. The snake summoner probably wouldn't like to be interrupted. But at least now he knew that Ronald had talked to her as well before leaving. When the blonde Jinchuruki reached the bottom floor, he grumbled as he realized his brother's mission meant that he wouldn't be around to cook breakfast for them a while. He kept grumbling as he reached into a cupboard and pulled out a bowl of oat cereal. He set it down on the table and got out a bowl and spoon, then retrieved milk from the fridge. He was sitting down after pouring his cereal and milk when the woman came down the stairs. She growled at him before he pushed the bowl in front of her and handed her the spoon. Relax, Enko-nichan. I know. Now will you admit it? The youth stared at her. She stared back at him, watching her reflection in those eyes that were older than they should be. The two sat there for a moment, staring at each other for a long while. She sighed and shook her head finally. Naruto glared at her, as she seemed to crumple in on herself. To the boy, the attraction between Ronald and Enko was obvious and deep. It grated on his nerves that neither one would admit they cared about the other as more than friends, but for now there was nothing he could do. He prepared his own breakfast, and was sitting down to begin eating when he spotted a clock. The time on it read 7:45. Oh crap, I'm late. He grabbed his stuff and was about to rush out the door when Enko tripped him and flung him back into the chair. He looked at her quizzically. Your teacher is renowned for being late, didn't you learn that yesterday? Eating your breakfast won't make you late with that one. Enko sat back down and continued eating while Naruto nodded. As he ate, his mind skipped back to Ronald shaking him in the middle of the night to let him know that he would be gone on a mission for a while. The younger boy had been about to ask if Ronald had told Enko yet when he saw the scratches on Ronald's face and guessed that he had. Those scratches remembered, Naruto looked up at Enko and blinked. Enko-nichan, why did you scratch Aniki? All he did was tell you he was leaving. If you reacted that badly to him leaving, why can't the boy trailed off when he saw a blush creep across the Tokubetsu Jounin's face? Oh wow, Aniki may have told her, but that isn't why he got scratched. I bet Aniki saw more than Enko wanted him to right then. The young blonde began grinning widely. He finished his breakfast and cleaned up his dishes before walking behind the still blushing Enko. Enko-nichan, if he saw you like that, don't you think you're entitled to a similar view from him? Her blush deepened for an instant before she realized who it was that was talking. A kunai whipped out through where Naruto had been standing, but the blonde terror had already raced out of the house, catching up his pack and weapons as he sprinted out through the door. The loyal snake summoner rubbed her cheeks as the boy's words sank in. Just maybe the brat is right for once. The blush on her face deepened as she climbed the stairs to get ready for her own day. On the stairs, she continued past her floor onto Ronald's. She stared down it for a while, then shook her head. I'll have time to explore later. He said his mission would last a while. She turned back and went down to her floor to prepare for any missions she might have. Training grounds. The last loyal Uchiha was grinding his teeth. The dobe had apparently ditched them, for he hadn't shown up on time to their meeting. Not that it mattered, as their sensei hadn't shown up either. For the past hour now he had been listening to the pink-haired fangirl of his shrieking at him about how cool he was. While normally he didn't mind being praised, the The girl's voice was damned annoying and it was grating on his nerves. A rustle beside the river had the Uchiha glaring in that direction. His scowl deepened when he saw that Naruto was there, staring at the 3 posts set in the river bank. It continued like that for a while, with Sakura shrieking Sasuke's glory, Sasuke glaring at Naruto, and an unresponsive Naruto staring at the wooden posts. This is how Kakashi found them when he showed up an hour later. This time the one-eyed pervert had his book in his pouch to prevent a repeat of yesterday when the book was perforated by Saban from the blonde student of his. He looked at said student curiously for a moment. Does he know this place? How? I've never seen him here. The man shook it off and looked at his students. Alright then team, we've got a test today. This is a kind of survival test. He pulled out 2 bells and strapped them to his waist. Your goal is to get these bells from me. Whoever gets one, passes the test. Naruto narrowed his eyes towards the silver-haired Jounin and was about to speak when Sakura blurted out. Sensei, there are only 2 bells though, and 3 of us. All 3 males around her winced at the pitch of her voice. She didn't notice it though, staring at the teacher for an answer. Kakashi grunted. So far only one of them wasn't like the profile said. Yes Sakura, that's correct. No matter what, at least one of you will fail. And just so you guys know, to give it your all, the person who fails my test has to go back to the academy for another year. All 3 would be Genin stiffened at that. Oh hell no. There is no way I'm going though. Another year of having my senseis purposefully sabotage me, even if Irika sensei didn't. 1 out of how many was that? The blonde shook his head. There was no way he would fail. So when Kakashi gave them the go-ahead, he sprinted into the trees. He perched in a tree, watching as the other 2 made it to the tree line after he had. He created a Kage Bunshin and had it move forward towards Kakashi. Now you're an odd one, why aren't you hiding? The silver-haired man looked at the clone suspiciously, not realizing what it was. The clone just thumbed its nose at him before running in a circle around him. The Jounin ignored it, as it was staying out of combat range. What on earth is this kid up to? While his clone was running circles around the uncaring Jounin, Naruto himself was sitting in the tree line thinking. He knew of past squads, and one thing he knew was that they all had 4 members. A Jounin and 3 Genin. So why had Kakashi told them that only 2 could pass? Things weren't making sense. Out in the field, Kakashi grew tired of having blonde flashing in front of his eyes over and over, and finally shifted forward and smacked at the clone. He was surprised when the clone flipped up and grabbed his arm, trying to throw him. However, the silver-haired Jounin hadn't had Guy as an eternal rival for several years without learning something about taijutsu. He countered the boy's lighter weight and spun him against the ground, fully expecting to have stunned the younger male. Thus, he was shocked when the clone poofed into a cloud of smoke. Kage Bunshin? He had no time to think, however, as a fireball raced at him from Sasuke. The Jounin blinked and spun to one side, narrowly avoiding the surprise attack. He groaned and put his book away. While Kakashi had been playing with the clone, Naruto had figured out that this was a test of teamwork. He had snuck over to where he had seen Sasuke and tried to convince the boy to work together. His attempt had failed horribly. The Uchiha had rushed out, seeing the clone as Naruto's attempt to win that had flopped. Thus it was his turn to try, to prove that he was better than the dope. Kakashi sighed. So we're skipping straight to lesson 3 with you, Sasuke. Ninjutsu. The Uchiha air shot another Gokakyu at Kakashi, who vanished before the blast hit. Sasuke's eyes darted around. He's not above me or on one of the sides, so where no? His thoughts were interrupted when he felt a hand grab his ankle and tug him under the ground, leaving only his head unburied. Kakashi left the Uchiha there as he went after Sakura, using a genjutsu of Sasuke kissing Ino to knock her out. The man shook his head. She was supposed to be a natural with genjutsu, but couldn't even see through that one. Obito-kun, your legacy had better be worth this. He blinked when he spotted the trenchcoat-clad genin in front of him again, only this time there were 3. Naruto-san, what's this? The 3 figures snorted in unison. Figured it out, Hataki-sensei. This is a test of teamwork. I tried talking to the Uchiha and the Banshee, but neither one would listen to the dobe. So I have to try this my way since I can't get them to work with me. The 3 Narutos slid into various taijutsu stances before leaping to engage the Jounin. Kakashi leapt backwards from one clone's kick only to throw himself sideways to avoid a punch from another Naruto. He had no time to rest as the third performed a painful sky leg right where his head had been mere seconds ago as he rolled to one side. He came up and thrust forward expecting to catch at least one of the Narutos, but was thwarted when another caught his intended target and yanked it aside. He growled and ran through a minor chain of hand seals, creating his own Kage Bunshin. This is a Jounin-level move, Naruto-san, let me show you how it's really used. The 2 Kakashis moved in sync to catch one of the Narutos, pummeling it into the ground only to have it poof into smoke. They turned and targeted the second and rushed him, one attacking at high speed towards the clone's front, while the other swung around to the side. The second Naruto merely smirked. Boom! It exploded, tossing both Kakashis away, forcing one to dispel into its own cloud of smoke as the other landed in a heap against one of the poles by the riverbank. He laid there stunned by the blast when the real Naruto walked up from the river behind him. Sorry Hataki-sensei, but you were never fighting the real me. I'll take these. He cut the bells from the dazed Jounin's belt and walked away, pausing to drop them at the feet of the Uchiha and Haruno. This is how much I dislike this team Hataki. I would rather go through another year of the academy than be teamed with them. However, I know that they can't proceed without me as this is a team test. So make of this what you will. I'm done, going to get some food. Naruto caught up his staff that he had leaned against a tree trunk and slid it into the holster on his back as he walked away. Slowly regaining control of his stunned body, the Jounin swore never to underestimate the blonde Jinchuriki again. He had, and been trumped by 2 Jounin-level moves. Honestly though, he couldn't have known that the boy had learned not only the dangerous and powerful Kage Bunshin, but its more combat-capable brother, the Bunshin Daibakuha. He sighed though when he realized what Naruto giving the bells to the others meant. It meant that they had passed, and solely because the blonde was unpredictable. Hokage Tower. Jounin Asuma reporting. The second Inoshikucho team will definitely live up to their father's reputations. The chain-smoking Jounin stepped back. Jounin Kurinai reporting. The reconnaissance team of Hyuga Hinata, Inuzuka Kiba, and Aburame Shino are functioning well. The red-eyed genjutsuist stepped back after her report. The 2 Jounin who had made it on time began talking between themselves, wondering where their third counterpart was. The other teams had already reported failure, but everyone had to stay until Kakashi gave his report. Jounin Kakashi reporting. The team of Uzumaki Naruto, Haruno Sakura, and Uchiha Sasuke passes. They're a bit rocky, but serviceable. Everyone turned to stare in shock at the man. Not only was he almost on time, he was passing a team? Their shock only increased when they saw the disheveled state of the man. Something had gone to town on the man. Wow Hataki, did your genin open up a can of whoop-ass on you? The random Jounin who spoke up was pinned by an intense level of Ki from the Jounin. However, Kakashi was nothing if not honest, or at least he tried to be. No Kiryu, not my team of genin. Just one of them. Even the Hokage was shocked at that one. He motioned for Kakashi to stay even as he dismissed the rest of the Jounin group. The man walked up to the Hokage's desk, looking slightly worse than he had when he had left to meet his genin. He answered the unspoken question on Sarutobi's face. It was Naruto, sir. He's a lot more advanced than his file from the academy states. I was informed he couldn't even use the Bunshin, and went in expecting an easy match. Not only did he know advanced taijutsu, to the point of knowing how to counter me at Chunin speed and use a grapple to do so, I found out that what I was fighting was a Kage Bunshin. I fought with Sasuke briefly before defeating him by pulling him into the ground, and the Haruno girl was defeated by a ranked genjutsu. That was when Naruto showed up again, this time 3 of him. He stated that he had figured out that my test was about teamwork, and said that he had tried to get the others to work with him only to be dismissed. So instead, he fought me with 2 clones, or at least he fought me with 2 clones. He displayed above-average taijutsu with the clones, until I created a clone of my own. I was able to beat one Kage Bunshin, and had defeated the second to discover that it was an exploding clone. This underestimation cost me, as it threw me against a pole and dazed me long enough for Naruto to capture the bells and pass the exam. The silver-haired Jounin hung his head ashamedly. I believe that Raisen was right, sir. My team may not be the proper place for Naruto. Sarutobi sighed. It would not do to have one of his Jounin doubting himself just as he was taking a genin team for the first time. The man spoke up sharply. Enough, Kakashi-kun. Your team is probationary. Maybe now that Naruto has proven himself to them, the others will warm up to him and become a better functioning team. The Jounin looked up, his single brown eye brightening once more. He nodded, and the Hokage gestured that he was dismissed. As he sat back, the man puffed on his pipe for several minutes thinking. I can't give them any B ranks to determine their official status unit Rano Ryugens. Then again, do I really want to send Naruto to his older brother as an apprentice, even if he is only adopted? He sighed and began running through his lists of available Jounin. 1 week later. This is Whiskers, target sighted. This is Fan, confirming target sighted. Flower here, ready to capture target. Cyclops. Go ahead, team. A brief scuffle ensued, and ended with Sasuke under Sakura, who was under Naruto, who had the cat Tora in his lap. Pink bow on left ear, yep, this is our cat. The boy climbed off and went to help Sakura up only to have to snatch his hand away before it was bitten. Keep your hands away from me and Sasuke-kun do! The Pinkette had not warmed up to Naruto like the Hokage had wanted. If anything, after Naruto had captured the bells for them, both Sasuke and Sakura had grown more hostile to their blonde teammate. Kakashi sighed at the interaction. He had tried everything he knew, but so far nothing had worked. To make matters worse, Naruto's older brother had been gone since the team test day, and nobody had any clue where he was. The man seemed to provide a foundation for the young boy, and his absence was proving telling. Luckily, the other person living with Naruto was helping the boy some, even if Kakashi never could get the boy to say who it was. Kakashi led Team 7 to the Hokage's office and watched as they reported their success. Somehow, Sakura managed to claim all the glory for Sasuke despite the boy having done nothing. Kakashi was appalled that things had gotten this bad, but with the council's orders, he couldn't do anything about it. He watched sadly as Naruto hung his head and walked out of the office. Moments later, the other genin followed him, with Sakura pestering the other for a date. The Uchiha heir ignored her and continued walking home. Kakashi turned back to the Hokage and shook his head. Hokage-sama, it's gotten worse. Now if Naruto even tries to go near them, Sakura attacks him. The older man rubbed his forehead wearily. I am definitely getting too old for this. Fine. Kakashi, I have a C-rank mission coming up that needs to be taken care of. In 3 days' time, bring your team here for it. Dismissed for now. The silver-haired Jounin bowed and left, trying to think of some way to salvage the team he had requested. Things were not going the way he had planned. Sasuke and Naruto were supposed to become like brothers in the way he and Obito had, with Sakura supporting Sasuke and Naruto supporting her. Instead, Sasuke hated Naruto almost as much as he hated Itachi, Sakura despised Naruto, and Naruto couldn't wait for the probationary effect to kick in and switch assignments. The Jounin couldn't figure out where things had gone wrong. Ichiraku's ramen shop. Naruto slurped down a strand of noodles and sighed. Since being put on his team, he hadn't seen any of his friends, or even his Aniki. Only Anko's reassurances that Rano hadn't just abandoned him to Hitaki kept the boy sane. His only consolations were that Anko was getting nearer and nearer to admitting her feelings for Rano as she got twitchier and twitchier the longer the Chunin was gone, and that Ayame and Tucci would give him one free bowl of ramen every day that Rano was absent. As he was munching on his noodles, he heard a loud voice approaching the shop. I'm telling you guys, he's there. Akamaru, and I can smell him. A softer voice interjected. KKKKKKBBBBAKK-kun. TTTT, that isn't nice. Sorry, Hinata, but it's a bloodline thing, you know? He is right though, Hinata-chan. My Kakachu report that our wayward friend's chakra is indeed in the stall now. This voice was almost as soft as the second, but didn't have the stutter. In through the front of the shop came the 3 speakers, and if you don't know by now, knows cyber cookies for you. The loud brash one dragged his friends over to their other friend who was already eating. Hey Naruto, where have you been, man? We kept trying to find you at your house, but that crazy snake lady always said you were off with your team. Getting along after all? Kiba ordered a bowl of beef ramen with a side of raw beef for Akamaru, as he turned to look at Naruto. Said boy sighed heavily and shook his head. Don't I wish, Kiba? Ever since the damn bell test, all it's been is Sakura singing the praises of the great Uchiha, and Hitaki looking gloomier and gloomier. Never mind that without me they wouldn't have passed at all, and that without me several of our crappy D-rank missions would have been utter failures. No, Sakura's always bragging about how Sasuke does everything, and honestly, it's making me sick. Shino laid a comforting hand on his friend's shoulder when the Jinchuruki was finished ranting. A slight idea flickered across his mind. Naruto-kun, on the day of the assignments, you were about to say something about getting out of your team if it turned out unsatisfactory. Care to elucidate now? The bug wielder tilted his head curiously. His attempt seemed to be successful, as Naruto perked up upon remembering that. Oh yeah. Since Aniki fought me getting assigned to this team, the Hokage set us up as a probationary team. If by the time we have completed either 7 C-rank missions or 1 B-rank we aren't a cohesive team, the team is getting split up. And depending on how Haruno is doing, she may either get put into the medical program, or get sent back to the academy. Sasuke will likely get apprenticed to Kakashi, and I don't know about who I'll get apprenticed to. The blonde boy sighed as he continued eating as the others' orders were set in front of them. Shino was watching Naruto out of the corner of his eye, and did not like the depressed set to his friend's shoulders. For the moment there was nothing he could do, since the only 2 people who could really cheer the boy up were currently on missions, one to guard an official during his brief visit to Konoha, the other to only Kami knew where. Hinata was watching Naruto too, and she was taking her Aniki's depression badly. She decided to try cheering him up though, and scooted closer to him and rested her head on his physical contact from the person he considered family. Did cheer the blonde container up, enough that he was able to finish his ramen with a smile. And while once Kiba would have taken the familiarity between the two the wrong way, He had been firmly told that it was a sibling affection and nothing more. With Anko. Honestly, if I have to listen to this little maggot try flirting with me one more time, ga. How I wish Ronald was here. He always knows how to make worms like this guy back off without bodily harm. Yes, Anko was on an escort mission for a young, affluential, and wealthy man. Sadly, the man wasn't handsome, or even homely. He had one of those faces that only a mother could love, on top of a body that made Gamabunta look small. All in all, his flirtatious advances towards the loyal snake summoner were driving her crazy. Thankfully, though, the mission was almost over as the Hokage's tower was in sight once more. Finally, they were standing outside the Hokage's office. The rotund man grabbed up Anko's hand before she could react and slobbered on it in an approximation of a kiss. "Thank you so much, miss. I really appreciated having you escort me around your fine chitty. If you're ever near my home, do look me up." Anko managed to rein in her homicidal impulses long enough for the man to go inside to finish making deals with the Hokage. She turned and shunshined home, quickly heating up a pot of water. When the liquid was boiling hot, she began plunging her hand in. This is the sight that Naruto walked in on. He stared at her for a moment before leaping over to her and grabbing her hand out of the water. From even the few seconds it had been in the water, his hand had turned a cherry red and was blistering. He grabbed burn ointment from a nearby cupboard and began placing it on her hand even as he scolded her. "Anko-nichan, why on earth would you do something like this?" The woman stared at him blankly for a long minute. Finally, with a slightly cracking voice, she spoke. "Gods, Naruto, where is he? Where is Rano? I miss him." The boy was about to make a wisecrack when he saw the haunted look on her face. It reminded him of his own when he woke up and looked at himself in the mirror. He sat down in her lap and pulled her head to his shoulder and neck, stroking her back. It felt awkward for the boy to be comforting the older girl, but he knew that right now she needed it. "I don't know, Nei-chan. All I know is that he said something about a lead on the man who made him a wanderer." He spoke softly as he rubbed her back with slow, even strokes. "Maybe now I can start getting her to admit that she likes Aniki like that. Not right now, though. Something happened. Nei-chan, will you tell me what happened that made you boil your hand?" The woman blinked at him for a moment, then looked aside fearfully. "No. You'll think I was just being silly." "Ankone, you're talking to me?" "Uzumaki Naruto, what on earth would I find silly?" The jounin sighed and looked away as she explained about her mission. After she was done, Naruto just patted her head consolingly. "Oh yeah, once she's recovered I am definitely not going to let up until she admits likes him." He sighed. "Ankone, go get showered, but keep that hand dry, okay? I'll try making us some dinner." He slid out of her lap and shooed her up the stairs. Grimly, he turned towards the stove. Aniki does this all the time. And Anko-nichan needs something to cheer her up. This can't be that hard. With that in mind, Naruto began cooking. Half an hour later, a cleaner and much refreshed Anko came down the stairs in her normal attire. She was faced with a catastrophe when she got to the kitchen. Half-burnt, half-raw steaks sat on a plate on the table, with clearly uncooked bread dough sitting beside them. She couldn't tell what exactly was in the pitcher on the table, only that it was purple and had pulp. She stood in the doorway, staring at the table, when Naruto's voice rang out. "I know." She looked around for the boy, and finally found him sitting in front of the stove, rocking back and forth with his knees drawn up to his chest. "I tried the steaks and failed. But be glad I threw the chicken out. That stuff was almost alive again." The boy shuddered. "The bread there's the safest of what I could make, so I gave up and made cinnamon rolls. Those I can make." He just kept rocking back and forth the whole time he spoke. Anko looked around the kitchen, taking in the sights of Naruto's cooking attempts, and began laughing. She couldn't help it, though she did try stifling the laughs for Naruto's sake. She didn't have to, though, as Naruto looked up at her and chuckled himself. At least it cheered her up. Not exactly how I intended to, but still, it did. The oven dinged, and the boy grabbed hot pads and pulled out cinnamon rolls. He deftly slathered some cream cheese icing onto 3 and handed them to Anko, who checked them for burn marks before biting in. This is the point that Anko discovered that Naruto hadn't been joking. Cinnamon rolls he could make. And make damn well. If she had to judge between his and Rano's, she didn't know whose would win. "Naruto-chan, did Rani teach you how to make these?" The boy nodded. "Yeah, I told him Hinata likes cinnamon rolls, and he showed me how to make them good. These and bacon are about all I can cook, though I forgot that. Anko-nichan, can you summon some snakes with strong stomachs to dispose of the steaks?" The bread dough, I think he broke off. "I don't know when Aniki is coming home, and oh, I have to keep up a strong face for Nei-chan." The boy shook his head. "The bread dough I think I can figure out how to bake safely." Anko looked at him curiously for a moment, then nodded and summoned a pair of snakes who were more than happy to eat the meat, messed up as it was. She turned and watched Naruto finish his own cinnamon rolls, then ushered him upstairs to shower and bed down for the night. She turned and looked back at the mess of a kitchen, then sighed. She created a kage bunshin and had it begin cleaning up. Ronald, you better get home. I don't know how much longer the gaki and I can go without you. She turned and trudged up the stair with a sad look on her face. Hokage's tower. Sarutobi Hiruzen sat back from the crystal ball and sighed. While it didn't seem to have been the best of ideas, he couldn't help but think that they needed this. And Ronald would have killed him if he had kept the information about the sighting of a man wearing the Hittite of the hidden hot springs from him. Enko, Naruto, I'm sorry. But Ronald asked that I not tell you where he was going. Makai, even I don't know where he is now. The elderly man sighed again and sank back into his seat with a heavy groan. He was definitely too old for this. I have to either ask Jiraiya to step up his efforts on finding her, or ask him to take the mantle himself. Naruto isn't old enough, and no one else is insane enough to want this forsaken post. The man rubbed his forehead tiredly. At least, from what Kakashi had told him, if Naruto's training proceeded apace, by the time he was old enough he would most likely be the strongest shinobi in Konoha. Looks like Ronald will continue being Naruto's instructor. If he succeeds in his mission, I may have to see about having that man take the Jounin exams. Can't have a Chunin apprentice master after all. He began working out how the Chunin could take the exams. Naruto's mindscape, and betcha forgot about the QB speaking up, Naruto leaned against the giant fuzzy paw and shook his head. Do you think that anyone besides Shino and Hinata will take you being in me well? I don't know, Kit. Only time will tell. I know that you aren't going to tell the Duck-ass or the Banshee, but what about your future team? Naruto shrugged his shoulders. That'll depend on who they are. Q. Yes? Do you think Aniki? I'm sure he's fine, Kit. After all, remember who the two of you took on and beat. Naruto blinked at that and nodded. That's right. It'll take more than some psycho Jashinist to beat my Aniki. Especially since we beat two of them before, even if they had only just gotten their rights. Konoha main gates, 3 days later. Naruto sighed as he shifted the normal pack of shuriken that he would draw from unless under extreme circumstances. Everything else he needed was stored in sealing scrolls scattered about his person, except for his staff which was leaning against the wall beside him, and his truncheon. He took the weapon out and examined it again, marveling that he and Ronald had been able to find a length of solid lorcan wood that the elder had been able to carve into a suitable weapon. He ran his fingers down the 3 feet of solid wood, sliding easily over the polished material. Humph, Dope can't even use a real weapon, has to use a wooden sword like a little kid. Naruto looked up with a weary sigh to look at the onyx-shaded eyes of the Uchiha heir. Obviously the boy had never been taught about weapons, or else he would have recognized the truncheon for the powerhouse weapon it was. As he saw Sakura walking up behind the Uchiha, he decided to put the boy in his place once more. Hey, Foul Eyes! Sasuke glared at him right until Naruto brought the truncheon up and to his side, like he was getting ready to use a jutsu. The Uchiha boy blinked and skittered back in a rush, obviously scared. Don't insult my truncheon when it's what I used to beat your sorry hide in our match, and so easily too. The black-haired boy growled at him. Anyone who looked at him could see the rage building in his dark eyes. Luckily, before Sasuke could start a fight he likely wouldn't win, Kakashi showed up with an older man holding a sake bottle. The man took a swig from the bottle and looked at the boys and the girl. Great. I'm paying for a trio of brats and a one-eyed man. Blondie there is the only one who looks like he might know something. The man trailed off, looking curiously at the boy who slid his truncheon back into its holster and bowed. Sasuke's fist clenched at that statement. How dare this drunkard say that the dobe is better than me? Kakashi began rubbing his forehead in consternation when Sakura shrieked the same thing that Sasuke had thought. He interrupted her to assure the man that no matter what else happened, he was a jounin and would be able to take care of it. And Kakashi's normal song and dance when Team 7 meets Tazuna. Mollified, the man settled down after stating that the team was expected to defend him with their lives. At this, Naruto's eyes tightened. For a C-rank mission, such shouldn't be necessary. The Jinchuruki was getting the feeling that the sake-drinking man was hiding something and decided to be on guard. The silver-haired jounin looked at his team as they caught up their packs. Sasuke's travel pack was only slightly larger than his back, and seemed to be fitted with the bare essentials from what the jounin could make out. Sakura's pack was easily taller than the girl, and Kakashi blanched when he saw that the girl looked to have at least one kit of makeup near the top, and Kami only knew what else under that. More and more he was doubting his decision to claim the girl for his team. His eyes traveled to the final member of his team and blinked several times. Naruto had only a couple more pouches than he normally had. Naruto, where's your gear? He's the dope sensei, he probably didn't even remember to get his spare clothes. The shrill voice made Naruto wince and rub his ears. Kakashi looked at him for an explanation. The boy sighed again. Apparently it was a day for him to sigh. He reached into one of the extra pouches he had on his waist and pulled out a small brown scroll. Basic camping gear is in here. One-man tent, cot, a small spit, a pot, a bowl and some accoutrements. Kakashi blinked Anijin as Naruto pulled out a small scroll with 3 colors on it. This is my clothing scroll. Has 4 changes already set, I can remove 1 set at a time. I have more stuff in other scrolls, but the rest is all extra stuff I may or may not need. He looked at the jounin, who was staring at him with a bit of shock. The drunken man had a similar look on his face, while Sasuke had a look of hatred on his features. Sakura had a stunned look for a moment, then her eyes went to Sasuke. Her expression became one of anger. Dobe! Stop trying to be better than Sasuke Yuen. Naruto's eyebrow twitched twice. He placed the scrolls back in his pouch and grunted. He had given up trying to talk sense into the girl and settled for ignoring her. Kakashi intervened before the girl could try punching Naruto. Alright, Team 7. Diamond formation around Tazuna-san. Naruto on point, Sasuke to the left, Sakura right. I'll take rear guard. The team took their spots, Sakura obviously unhappy to have someone between her and her Sasuke-kun. The team moved out quickly, Naruto leaving a couple clones to talk with Izumo and Kotetsu at the gates. Once the group reached the tree line, Naruto summoned several Kage Bunshin and had them fan out into the trees around them as roving patrols. He kept only a sliver of his attention on the road as he sank into his mind. Ne Kyubi-sensei, any chance you'll teach me something new while we're out here? The boy queried his tenant as he kept walking. A single red eye opened and blinked before looking down at the mental avatar the boy summoned when still conscious and desired to speak with her. I might, Kit, I might. It depends on whether or not you can get away from the heir to the bastard and his banshee, as well as the Cyclops. Wouldn't want one of them to learn your techniques now, would we? The fox demon closed the eye and chuckled warmly before opening it again. Kit, I'm beginning to get worried about your pack alpha. He's never been away this long, especially not since meeting the purple-haired snake mistress. I suggest you have one of your clones use the Alter Tech 2 morph to a bird and fly back to Konoha to see if you can keep tabs back there. Naruto's avatar nodded thoughtfully. In the real world, Naruto created another clone and instantly dispersed it so the others gained the knowledge. One of the clones that was hanging near the back of the group behind Kakashi received the command and nodded before morphing into an eagle and winging back towards Konoha. Naruto's eyes tracked it before it went over the wall, noting a slight shimmer as it passed over the wall. Kyubi-sensei, did you? Yeah, Kit, I saw that. What you just saw is one of the reasons Konoha is almost impossible to infiltrate. There's a chakra barrier over the entire village. From what I remember, a team of A and B watches over it, monitoring for any outsiders entering the village. Your clone should be fine since your chakra signature is a registered Konohanin signature. Now then, time for a refresher course. You and I haven't had time to talk lately, and I want to make sure that you haven't forgotten everything I taught you. First off, what is a Kitsun's prime ability? Genjutsu. But I can't use them still, beyond the Henge and the Veil Jutsu. Anything else I overload chakra on. But because you're in me, I've started to become immune to them. Good boy. But be careful, because as both you and I know, there are techniques that can defeat even me. Next up, the element you got from me. Have you begun training with it at all? No, sensei. Except for the Kitsunbai, I haven't used any Kaiten tech. Ronaloniki tried to get me to use some, but every time I end up channeling wind chakra into the fire tech and it makes a big boom. So fire tech is out of the question, and lightning always gets swallowed up, so I can't use that element either. I might be able to learn Doton or Suiton, but Aniki isn't ready for me to become any stronger than I am now. He says I already have a name in the bingo book, it wouldn't do for that to get kicked up a rank. Kit, real world now. The Kyubi cut their talk short and ejected his avatar from the den. Naruto's eyes blinked as he filtered back in. He looked around, curious as to what the Kyubi had felt. Then he saw 2 men standing in the center of the road staring at them with dark gleams in their eyes. Or more appropriately, staring at the drunk in the center. He looked at Sasuke and Sakura, but neither seemed to notice the men. They have a genjutsu over them, we see through it, they don't. Naruto nodded when the explanation was made. He casually reached back and grabbed the end of his staff, fluidly swinging it out of the holster and in front of himself. He noticed that the people in front tensed when he did this, looking at each other nervously. He took a moment to pause the group. Naruto? Is something wrong? No, just want to stretch for a second, my muscles are locking up. Before anyone could suggest moving past him, the boy's staff began flicking out to the sides, covering the entire path. He took the time as he warmed up to study the men in front of him. They were tall, about Kakashi's own height, but much heavier set. They were wearing dark blue clothing that looked much too heavy for the environment they were in, meaning they had traveled from somewhere. Each had a chain hanging from one arm, connecting the two together. However, it was the masks on their faces that gave it away. These two men were wearing rebreathers, and only the elite of AIM wore that. The elite of AIM, and many ninja from Kirigakure. And since these two were just standing in the center of the road, he doubted they were AIM elite. What's a couple of Kirya? Explains it. Still doesn't answer why, though. Gotta find that out. He settled the staff along his shoulders and sighed. He looked back at Kakashi, and nodded once, seeing that the man had spotted the genjutsu. Naruto still didn't know what the genjutsu was of, but apparently the man could see it and had seen through it. His other teammates appeared not to have noticed though, and that worried the young demon container. To him, the two men's move was apparent and blatant. They started running forward, the chain snapping taut between them. Naruto could see that the chain was edged. He sighed and stepped forward a pace, right into the men's charge. The boy slammed the staff into the ground, driving it down into the earth just before the two men got past him. Their chain caught on the metal of the staff, and rather than cutting through it like they obviously expected, it began wrapping around. The boy was treated to the rather comical sight of two grown men being flung off their feet and jerked into each other. Sadly, it seemed that the men had not been hired simply for comical relief though, when they immediately disconnected the chain from their gloves. Naruto gulped loudly when claws slid out of hidden sheaths on the gloves, wickedly carved and faintly gleaming. Guys, be careful, those blades are poisoned. While he normally wouldn't have said anything, the fact that the Banshee and the Emo hadn't even noticed the genjutsu did not speak well for them. Thus, he took more steps than he normally would to protect them. His musings were cut short when the man on the left dashed forward, the claws swinging in at Naruto with deadly speed. The man felt his claws sink into something and smiled nastily behind the rebreather. And then there were four. Hey now! Why on earth are you counting me out? The indignant exclamation from below his claws had the man snorting in surprise. He looked down and growled before lashing out with his foot and kicking the blonde-haired boy who had somehow blocked his attack. What he wasn't expecting was to be jerked off his feet by his arm. He landed in an ungainly heap, but quickly recovered and shot to his feet. Naruto grinned. His Lorcan truncheon had saved his life. The claws had stuck fast in the dense wood, and even though the force behind the blow had forced him to his knees, it had been worth it to see one of these Kiri-nuke-nin get pulled off his feet again. Looking over at the group though, he saw that Kakashi had vanished, and Sakura and Sasuke were struggling to protect Tazuna against the second man. Naruto's bright blue eyes darkened when he turned back to his opponent. Sorry guy, it's been fun, but now the mission is in danger. And Iniki told me when the mission is in danger, I should kick it up a notch. With those words, the boy created a trio of Kage Bunshin. The wisps of smoke they arrived in seemed similar to the normal Bunshin jutsu, which in Naruto's opinion, was what doomed his opponent. The four Narutos, each wielding a black truncheon, rushed in and attacked the man simultaneously. And while a smarter, or faster opponent might have survived, the man he was fighting had grown accustomed to preying on civilians, occasionally fighting a couple of genin with his brother. He was unprepared for the concentrated assault coming at him from all sides. The claws flashed out desperately, skewering one Naruto, only to have it explode in a puff of smoke. That was when the first truncheon struck. The heavy blow snapped the man's arm at the wrist, making the claw hand go limp. He managed to block a second truncheon blow at his side, but then a third slammed home from behind, driving into his kidney. His eyes widened in agony as he toppled to the ground. The truncheon that crashed into his forehead and knocked him out was a blessing. Turning to look at the other fight, he saw that the second attacker was contemptuously swatting aside all of Sakura and Sasuke's shuriken and kunai as he walked forward at a slow, deliberate pace with a gleam in his eyes. The boy scowled for a moment as he watched this, then came up with a plan. The only weapons the man bothered to avoid were the few that Sasuke threw that had explosive tags attached to them. He apparently didn't want to get blown up. Naruto's grin was bright as he created another clone and had it alter its shape to look like a kunai. He grabbed the kunai and hefted it for a second before grinning. Hey jackass! The man looked over slightly, blinking to see his brother unconscious. A low growl could be heard. That's when Naruto sent the kunai in his hand beaming straight at the man. The man caught the kunai, intending to throw it back at Naruto as an insult. What he wasn't expecting was to hear a small voice say boom. He looked around, then noticed that the kunai in his hand had a mouth at the tip. His eyes widened when it exploded, tearing off his hand, and a shower of claws on his other hand retracted as he grabbed the bleeding wreck of a stump on the end of his arm, screaming in agony. Naruto's own eyes widened. He had expected the man to deflect it. The resulting explosion would have stunned him long enough to be knocked out. Never one to be caught unprepared though, the boy sprinted forward and slammed his truncheon into the man's jaw, making it snap shut. Naruto watched as something pink and fleshy fell to the ground, and shuddered when he realized the man had just bitten off the end of his own tongue. Thankfully, Kakashi appeared at that point and dragged the wounded man away. He quickly used a basic medical jutsu to stop the blood flow. The man would survive, but being unable to talk or use his hand without the help of a strong medic, he would never be able to be a shinobi again. He looked over at the first one that Naruto had defeated. That one, they would be able to interrogate. He saw that Naruto was already walking over to the man. He nodded to the boy's inquisitive look. Sasuke and Sakura were recovering from watching a man's hand explode in front of them. While not as bad as their first kill would be, such an occurrence was a first for the two. Kakashi walked over to the two and put a comforting hand on their shoulders. He looked at their escortee and blinked in shock. The man had curled into a ball and was nursing on the sake bottle like a babe on a bottle of milk. He sighed and herded his wards together even as Naruto dragged the now reviving attacker over to where his partner was lying half dead. Naruto had trussed his first foe up like a pig, leaving the man no wiggle room. Slowly his opponent's eyes came into focus. The first thing he saw was Naruto, standing over him holding a kunai in his hand. Listen up. You're going to tell me who hired you to attack the drunk. And if I don't brat? Look over at your friend. The man's eyes flickered over to his brother. A long, low moan escaped from his lips. At the end of it was a word that made Naruto's shoulders tense. Aniki, well, now I know who they are. The demon brothers of Kirigakure. Went rogue when their leader crap. He's here. Despite his realization, Naruto grabbed the man's face. Look at me. Answer me, or what happened to your brother's hand is going to happen to your ass. I'll ram a kunai with explosive tags on it up and set them off. The man began babbling about being hired by Gato to kill the old man. Pressing the kunai closer to his rear had the man revealed that there were two more in his group, but not even cutting open the man's trousers could get him to say who they were or what skills they had. But that was fine with Naruto. He knocked the man out swiftly and had a pair of clones take the men back towards Konoha. He didn't know if they would get there, but he would try. He stood up and returned to the group. His stare at Tazuna told Kakashi all he needed to know. Alright guys, we're returning home. Tazuna-san, I suggest that next time, you not lie about the difficulty of the mission. You could have gotten my students killed. Kakashi started to lead Sasuke and Sakura away to realize that Naruto wasn't following him. He turned around. Naruto had one hand on the man's shoulder and was talking with him in a low voice. The genin stood up and looked over at the jounin. Hatake, you can leave. But we took the mission and I intend to fulfill it completely. I've done that with every hunt my Aniki and I too, and I'm not about to stop now. And Hatake, if we leave, there won't ever be any missions for us from Wave. Hell, there won't be a Wave at all. I know of Gato. He latches onto a town and runs it into destitution. Then when there is nothing, no hope, no money, no life, left in the village, he abandons it and searches for the next one. He normally uses mercenaries, so missing me means that this man here, this drunkard, is actually pretty damn important. I can't conceive leaving a village for Gato to have his way with, and if this guy can stop that, I want him to live. Kakashi sighed at this speech. He looked over and saw that Sasuke was already walking back towards Tazuna and Naruto, with Sakura trailing behind him. Great, they're going to get themselves killed. I can't just leave them to themselves. He walked back over and picked Tazuna up. Alright, we're continuing the mission. But know this, Tazuna-san. Your village, once it recovers, will have to pay the full A-rank mission that this has become, along with an interest. He set the drunken man down, pleased to see that the man had sobered up in a surprisingly short amount of time. He looked at the genin team, noting the steely determination in Naruto's eyes, and the barely checked rage in Sasuke's. How dare that bastard steal my kill? Yes, the would-be avenger had thought that once the man was close enough that he would just let Sasuke kill him. The boy was conveniently ignoring the fact that when the man's hand had exploded in a spray of blood and muscle issue, that he had frozen instead of taking the kill then. And so it was that once again Sasuke's rage was building towards Naruto for reasons that resided solely in the onyx-eyed boy's head. And despite the fact that it was Naruto who had stopped the man, Sakura had managed to reverse them in her mind. In her memories, the boy beside her futilely flinging weapons at one man was Naruto, while it had been Sasuke who beat one with his fists and then burned the other alive with a gokakyu. Her mind had long ago been fractured, when her inner personality was born. It was no hard task for the psychotically obsessed girl to switch the events around in her mind. After all, to her at least, there was no way that Naruto of all people could have saved the day.